The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
College football season is right around the corner, and here at Belly Up, we are all very excited for it. We are ready to talk all things college football today. We've got a couple of guests. We're going to have David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback, as well as a current Daily Wire host over at the sports show there, the Crane & Company. We also have Connor Hayden, one of Nebraska's top sports shows. He's going to come on to talk a little bit about Nebraska and the Big Ten. We're going to talk a lot of college football, and we're very excited. We hope you guys stick around and have a lot of fun with us. College football season is almost among us. Across the nation, fans are waiting. The stadiums are empty, but soon they'll be full. The pregame talks, traditions, walking out of the tunnel. This for one goal. What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Belly Up Sports College Football Super Show. Hopefully that video got you hyped up and ready to go for college football season. We are now about a month away, just almost a month away from college football starting. It's going to be an exciting season, a lot of things to look forward to. We're going to have some of the same teams that we always see in the top. We're also going to see some newer teams. We've got some new teams coming to the Power 5 when we look over the Big 12. So there's some fun looking into some of that and kind of speculating what could happen with that conference. We're going to talk about all of it, guys. We're going to have a long show, so hopefully you guys can stick around. And you got to wake up because it's still early in the morning for some of us. Some of us, it's 9 or 10 in the morning. Maybe we should have already been awake. But if you need to wake yourself up and get yourself started, you can get yourself started with a fresh cup of Mahler Bros Golf coffee. So Mahler Bros Golf is a sponsor of Belly Up, and it's an amazing product. You can go over to mahlerbros.com and check out everything over there. But if you go to mahlerbros.com/coffee, you can check out all of the golf-themed coffee. It is the first that we know of golf-themed coffee on the market, so you can go check it out. I've actually got myself my cup of Mahler Bros Golf going this morning. I've got the Ace Blend. There's a package here to kind of show and kind of display it for you guys. Some amazing coffee. It's small batch. It's specialty grade, and it's also roasted to order, which makes it a little better than some of the store-bought coffees that you can get. So go check it out. If you're a golfer, you're going to love it. If you're not a golfer and you just like a good cup of coffee, it's still a great product for you to go and try out. You can use code BELLYUP at mahlerbros.com for 15% off. So go over there, check out all of the coffee, and if you want, you can even check out some tumblers or mugs, stuff like that, to go check out more to kind of go along with the coffee. But there's all kinds of stuff. You can go check out mahlerbros.com and use code BELLYUP for 15% off site-wide. Like I said, we are getting into college football season, and so we're having this super show here with Belly Up Sports. It's not just me, so you're not going to have to listen to me talk all morning. We also have a couple of guests, but then we also have some other Belly Up personalities. We've got Jay from the Unfair Sports. Jay, how you doing, man?
Doing well, doing well. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk some college football.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've also got Kevin Langley. Kev, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Do you still have the what is it, the quad on the tailgate, right? Is that still going
Tailgate
on?
in the quad? Yeah, we're
Tailgate
starting
on.
that back up. We took a little hiatus. We're starting that back up in, I think, August 9th. We're good. I actually haven't announced it yet. We're starting recording again August 9th, so August 10th will be our first show back after our hiatus.
All right, yeah, sweet. So we're excited for it, kind of going along with college football. And then we've got Tyler. Tyler, you're over with Sports Scramble podcast. How you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, that intro definitely got me ready to get going on this season. So it's definitely good to be talking some college football.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it, guys. Let's start off. First thing I want to kind of talk about is some potential top teams. I think obviously we're going to have the normal ones. Even though I think there's a lot of questions with Alabama, I suppose at least the media wants to say that there's questions about Alabama. They're still going to be in the top. They're going to be in the discussion. And then you've got your Georgia with looking for a three-peat. They're obviously going to still be up there. And looking around the nation, you can see a couple of other teams. I'm sure Ohio State. And I have a high suspicion that Michigan is going to be doing very well this year with a lot of returning talent from their roster. And just looking overall and seeing all of the big teams that we know. But let's talk some potential teams. Who's some other teams kind of outside those normal ones that you guys kind of see as being some of the top tier teams? Tyler, I think maybe we can start off with you. I think your LSU Tigers are probably going to be one of those teams to kind of make some ruckus in college football this season.
Yeah, I would say LSU, but I'm going to go on a different route. I'm going to say that Florida State. I think that even if they lose that season opener against LSU, I think that they can run the table, beat Clemson. I just don't really believe in Clemson this year. I just think that their offense is K. Klubniak. It's definitely got to answer some questions for me. They're definitely going to have one of the top defenses in the ACC, but they're really the talent. With Jordan Travis, he saw the potential last year. I think that he's going to be even better, even maybe get into the Heisman discussion. So I think that Mike Norvell's squad is ready to compete and be a college football playoff contender this year.
Yeah, I like it. And I think, looking what Florida State was building off of from last year, they really surprised a lot of people. And Coach Norvell did a great job putting that team together and did it in a pretty quick fashion, considering that Florida State's been down in the slumps for quite some time now. So, yeah, I definitely like that pick. Kevin, do you have any other teams you want to throw in there as potential top teams?
I want to talk about Colorado. Everyone's talking about Colorado. You got Dion. I'm a big believer college, you can win based off of your coach's personality. He's overhauled that roster. He has that big kind of in-your-face personality that everybody loves. Jackson State was 4-8 before he got there, right before they were 3-3 his first year in that COVID year. I'm very curious to see that. But also Nebraska. Nebraska has fallen on hard times. Matt Rule has shown an ability to win at the college level, at every level in college. And I'm excited to see him back in the college ranks after his failed stint in Carolina to see what he can do and see what Nebraska can do when they have a coach who actually wants to recruit and isn't just sleeping once the season ends and kind of sleeping during the season too. Because I don't know what Scott Frost was doing 99% of the time last
year. Yeah, no, it's really shocking. My family is Nebraska fans. I've got a lot of family that's all Nebraska fans. And so looking at Nebraska, that's definitely one that I'm excited to see. And around here, I'm right in the Cornhusker Nation, really. And you can hear a lot of buzz going with Nebraska. And I talked quite a bit about Nebraska with Connor Hayden. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any of our guests on live with us this morning, but I was able to pre-record them and get them anyways, so that way they could still join us here on the show this morning. But yeah, Connor Hayden kind of talks about Nebraska and how they're not going to get their hopes too high right now, but you can tell that Nebraska fans are really feeling like this was the right hire. It wasn't the hire I think that they were expecting to get, but it was the right hire. And yeah, I agree with you. I think he's the right potential. But Jay, do you have some other top teams you want to throw around in there?
Yeah, both picked some great teams with Florida State and Colorado ones to really look at. For me, honestly, it's Tennessee right now. And I say Tennessee because the big sleeper behind them is that Hendon Hooker's gone. They lost Jalen Hyatt, so there's going to be a little bit of change on the regime as far as the quarterback goes. But Joe Milton's been there for the last 3 years. And so if Joey Halsey, the offensive coordinator / quarterback coach, can control that arm of his, he has the strongest arm in college football. If he can get him to control it and put more touch on it, which it looks like he's getting to that point, that offense is going to be just as dangerous as it was last year. And they put some improvements on the defensive side, getting some players out of the portal and recruits. It looks like they're poised to make one last run in the East before things really get overhauled a second time in the SEC and potentially make some waves.
Yeah, I like Tennessee too. And the thing is, everyone's kind of looking at them after you lose Hyatt and you lose Hen and Hooker and seeing like how much of an offensive powerhouse those two were as a duo. I agree with you. I think I trust in them quite a bit to be able to pull things around. I think Josh Heupel has done an amazing job over there. And that's, the funny thing with Josh Heupel is I've always liked him. He's an Oklahoma guy, so of course I'm going to like him. But I didn't really like him when he was at Oklahoma. There were certain things at Oklahoma, man, I wanted him out the door. And now that I see him at Tennessee, it's much easier for me to root for him. I love what he's doing over there. So yeah, I like Tennessee quite a bit too. I'll throw in another one for the mix. And I can't recall. I think I might have talked about this with Connor Hayden a little bit when we were talking about the Big Ten. But I'll throw Wisconsin in there. I have a hunch that Wisconsin can really surprise people. We're talking about new coaches with Dion and Matt Rule. Luke Fickell going up to Wisconsin, I think that was a splash of a hire. I think that was an amazing hire. And just seeing what Luke Fickell did with Cincinnati and the fact that it wasn't like a Scott Frost who went into UCF and had maybe 1 or 2 good seasons, but it was a consistent recruiting trail that you could see that he was leaving there at a small school in Cincinnati that really didn't have anything to offer. And he also brought in, he also developed a lot of talent too and made that school into something. And not only that, but he brought them to the college football playoffs, which even UCF couldn't do, which to be fair, I think that they had a little bit more time to try to expand that and get the committee open to the idea of it. But the fact that they made it there and they put up a really good fight considering who they were going against. So just the fact that that Luke Fickell did that much with that small of a school and with that little bit of resources, I really like Wisconsin. I think they could be a top potential team. I don't think they're going to do anything major like making the playoffs or anything, but they're a team that I see in the top 25 and maybe even winning 10 games this season and putting up a good fight in the Big Ten championship game. But yeah, I mean, that's just looking around the nation. I see a lot of teams, and there's a lot of teams that we have a lot of question marks on. We were talking on our show, Rising to the Occasion, that we were kind of going through and making our predictions, and I was talking about how silly it is to make predictions on things that you've never seen before, and that's kind of the fun that we have, and as sports fans, and especially in college football, just kind of looking around and making different predictions on players that we've never seen, systems that we've never seen, especially whenever you look at completely new teams that are completely rebuilding, like a Wisconsin or even Nebraska and teams like that, who you have a completely new coach. What do you expect to see, and what do you think you're going to see, and making predictions on it. It's really kind of a stupid thing for us to do, but it makes a little bit of fun for the sport, especially when we can't watch the sport live yet. But let's go on a little bit. I want to kind of get into a little bit of the transfer portal and the NIL, because I dove into this pretty deep with David Cohn, had him on and talked with him. I was able to record that yesterday with him. But looking at the transfer portal, we talked about how crazy the transfer portal has gotten. The transfer portal's really always been around. It's just not been called the transfer portal. Guys have always had an option to transfer, but it was a little bit more of a restriction on the way that they transfer. Now it just seems like overnight they can hop in and go off and go over somewhere and just head off to a new team. Really no restrictions to it, no questions asked, and just jump right over. And on top of that, not only has that gotten crazier as time goes on, it seems like this year it's gotten crazier than ever, especially the way that it just seems like a free agency in the NFL. But then we also have NIL to kind of build on top of it and really making it even more crazy. But Kev, I'll start off with you, kind of looking at NIL. I guess we'll start off with that. How do you think we get NIL under control when we see how crazy it's gotten with pay to play and all of the extracurricular that seems to be going on outside of it.
Well, I'm pro NIL, by the way. I think it's
Yeah,
very important.
I agree.
I don't like people complaining about it, but it's really easy to fix on NIL. What you do is you build a time machine first. You go get the DeLorean. You go back in time so Mark Emmert doesn't drag his feet on getting policies in place to prevent this from becoming the Wild West, which it has become. And then you go from that. No, they just need common sense policies with this. They need to say, like, oh, you can't pay, this money can't come directly from the school. It can't come from boosters for the school. NIL collectives are fine with these rules in place, whatever they decide they are. It shouldn't be this much of a nightmare because the planning should have been done before. Now, I'm hoping that new NCAA Commissioner Charlie Baker can figure out a way to navigate this a little bit better, which I think he can. He is a Republican governor from a very liberal state, so he is used to dealing with opposing ideas violently at times, and I think it'll work out, hopefully, but they just need to put rules in place and have the schools follow.
Yeah, and I like your reasonable solution of just going and building the DeLorean and going back in time too. I think that's totally reasonable. So let's just do it. But no, I agree with you, and I don't want to spoil too much of what David Cohn was saying, but I think you pretty much had a very similar answer. Just finding the right leadership, and that's something that's been lacking. And it's crazy how far it's gone. It seems like it's getting out of hand, but. Jay, did you have much more on NIL to kind of what we can do to crack down on it?
Yeah, so I know that we love bagging on Emmett and what he did there, the NCAA, and I kind of feel bad for him in a way. And this is the reason why I say that. He was awful at his job, which is going to just go ahead and put that out there. That's my first disclaimer. Secondly, the problem is that all the restrictions that he would have potentially tried to do, he's going to lose in the federal and at the Supreme Court level once it goes through lawsuits, because the Alston versus the NCAA deal that went down basically was the first time, I think, in American history that all of the Supreme Court justices agreed on something. Like, it was a 9-0 decision that it's ridiculous for the idea that the NCAA can, and this is what Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh said, is in a way, it's ridiculous that the NCAA can have a product that's and not pay their employees or pay their people bringing in the money based upon the fact that the consumers don't want you to pay the employees that are doing the job. So that's a paraphrase of what he said, but in other words, antitrust is there. There's no way the NCAA is going to win this deal. So Emmett was smart about the fact that I can put in something, we're going to get sued, and they're going to become employees for the universities. There's nothing I can do, hands tied. But the biggest problem was they should have done something in the beginning. They should have had at least a framework. Instead of passing the buck over to the states or begging Congress to save us, if they would have put some ideas out there, and again, I'm also very pro NIL because I think it makes zero sense for players to not be able to make money off of their name, image, and likeness, because regardless, they're going to find a way to funnel money to these kids as if it's, whatever way they can get these good athletes to these schools. And so the biggest thing with NIL to me is if they want to make this work and if the goal is to create quote unquote parity, which does not exist, it is really a parody to think that exists. You've just got to have framework saying when you can start making the deals. I think that's probably the most important. Have certain dates when you can actually create deals, especially using the collectives. But if it's like a local dealership or if it's a national brand, they should be able to do that anytime they want to. But I think if collectives are going to be involved, they should have certain time frames that they can make these deals and negotiate. That way, it kind of calms some of the stuff down. But for the most part, there's almost nothing that can be done that the NCAA can be involved in that's not going to lead to them being a lawsuit and making every single player an employee.
Yeah, I like that. And you're right. I mean, there needs to be something, and it sucks that we've gotten this far before something was done. It was just kind of thrown out there. But Tyler, I mean, you can tell us how much you're anti NIL and just hate it. It's the worst thing in the world. You can go off and just spit it all off, man.
Yeah, I think that it was already a gap between the Group of Five and the Power Five, and I think with NIL that gap has just gotten even larger. All these Power Five schools all these athletic foundations set up. We're spitting out millions and millions of dollars. You have car dealerships being like, "Hey, Bijan, you want a Lambo? Here you are." So I just think that it's been more of a gap. The NCAA has really done nothing. There's no restrictions. There's no framework to it. I was all NIL because really, the college football video game, that was literally the only reason why that was out. And now NIL is here, but once again, we have to wait another year. So hopefully we get that video game. So that's all I really care about. I'm all cool for pay to play, but I also want to play this dang game too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And what's funny too is like looking back, I can remember whenever it first went away, the college football video game, it was like a lot of players were like, man, I liked the fact that I could play as myself. I didn't really care about getting paid.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of funny to see. But no, I agree with everybody. I like the idea of NIL. I like the idea that if somebody is using your name, your image, or your likeness, or all three, that you should get paid for that. And if the market says you deserve to get paid for something, I don't think there should be restrictions on that. Where it becomes messy is like what we've been talking about with some of these things where the colleges are buying in and pay to play and the collectives and all that. That's where it's gotten really messy. Where if Dr. Pepper wants to bring in Kyler Murray to do a new commercial for him, he should be able to do that on the side, or even looking at actual examples that have happened in the past. I don't know if you guys know who Destroying is on YouTube. But he could have gone to UCF and played college there, but he was going to have to give up his YouTube page because he was making money on YouTube. And stuff like that just seems ridiculous. And so the fact that, and there's several cases of that happening, or even looking back in the past, I think like what happened with Braxton Miller, I didn't really like what was going on there. And I just felt like he was being paid for stuff that had to do directly with him, and he wasn't using the college to really exploit that much, in my opinion. And so I don't think he should have been punished for that. And so stuff like that, looking back, I think NIL has really gotten messy because it's not just players getting paid for their name, image, and likeness. It's gone beyond that. And I think, like what Kevin said too, and I think Jay even kind of touched on, is just overall the aspect of we've already gotten this far. How do you correct what's already been screwed up? And that's kind of where we're at now.
Kind of want to add what you mentioned, Josh, is that there's some real world scenarios where NIL really hindered some players on just simple stuff. Like there was an offensive lineman, I think he was at West Virginia. I know that he was on the East Coast, at West Virginia, North Carolina, or something. But he sings. He likes to sing country music, and he likes to do gigs on the weekends. But he couldn't do that as a player at the collegiate level because that's considered, illegal benefits, even though he's performing, like he's using his talents to perform. And so NIL's allowing some of these athletes to do that. Those that there was one player that he trains dogs, and he couldn't do dog training because of that. And so a lot of the stuff, the passions they had as kids and the things they were doing as growing up, they weren't able to continue because technically they couldn't make money off of it, because there was going to be a booster, which is the most fascinating thing in the world. Is boosters love giving players money and they get like zero real benefit from it. Like what benefit did these rich people get from giving these kids in these schools athletic programs money besides, I guess, status? But like really, what do you get out of it? You give a kid $100,000. What do you get from that? You get like a sticker that says, "Hey, I'm a booster." Like it's hilarious that they do not mind wasting money on them just to get bragging rights with their schools. And so just these kids not being able to do the little things they could do when they got out of high school or while they were kids. That was the thing that disturbed me the most. And that's excited me about NIL, because those little scenarios are really going to start to, show, and you'll see big benefit from that.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the most exciting, just for the players being able to have that freedom. But then, of course, us as fans, like Tyler said, being able to play the NCAA football game, and hopefully we don't have to push that back another year. Hopefully that ends up coming up. But guys, let's go ahead and click over to the David Cohn interview, and we'll let him kind of talk. We'll take a little bit of a break, and we'll be back with everybody after this interview. Hello, everybody, and welcome in a very special guest. We've got David Cohn, a former Michigan QB and a current co-host of the Daily Wire sports show, Crane & Company. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and get into it. We're talking all things college football, kind of getting ourselves ready for the college football season. Very exciting time of the year as we're looking forward. But I want to start with NIL. I think NIL has been very crazy. And when we combine that with the transfer portal and just everything that all of that has combined together, it's really almost gotten out of hand. And it seems like it's just kind of growing and expanding, and it's changing the game quite a bit. But first, let's start off with NIL. What do you think is kind of the answer for something that we can do to kind of get this NIL under control in college sports?
Well, in a single word, leadership. Some leadership would be fantastic on the issue. You have the NCAA here who is pleading with Congress and the government to get involved before they even attempt to solve the issue themselves. I mean, that is never a good thing. Whenever you see a corporation or some entity in the public pleading for the government to get involved, that usually means that that entity is failing in some capacity or another. Now, we've had Senator Tommy Tuberville on our show several times. He's come on and said, look, here are my answers to be able to solve name, image, and likeness. And I think he has some good ideas. You saw this week some other senators and representatives saying that they want to get involved in NIL. I mean, the first thing we need is some sort of leadership. And, they've opened the floodgates up here all at the same time. Like you mentioned, it's not just name, image, and likeness payments, but you also have these collectives, which is essentially pay for play, plus the wide open transfer portal where any player can leave a school at any given time. We have a wonderful discussion that we're releasing next week with Shannon Terry, who's the founder of On3 and Rivals and 247. We really got into the weeds on this because Shannon believes there needs to be essentially, revenue sharing in college sports, which again, there are any number of scenarios that can work. I mean, let's just go back to the very beginning of this. At first, when you went off to college, if you were good enough to play a sport, like joining the rowing team or joining what then became, the football team, you could do that. And these schools said, you know what, why don't we offer free tuition and scholarships, and then we can actually go recruit guys to be on these athletic teams, right? And then that went from, well, what if we pay these players money to join the team? That was always the next logical conclusion. How do you get these guys in to be on our team, right? I'm a free market guy, and that's the greatness of America. America is a free market country. I've never known anyone who said, I love college football because the guys out there who are doing all the playing aren't getting paid a single dollar. No one has ever said that, but there is something about college football that draws people in even more than the professional game in the NFL. And what we have now in college football is even more complex in many ways than the professional league. A lot of people are saying, well, this open transfer portal and NIL, it's essentially free agency in the NFL. No, it's worse than that, because at least in the professional league, you have a contract that you have to stick to. So they're going to have to figure something out. I don't know if it's just open these collectives up where a team can spend as much money as they want on certain players, and let's see how that works. There has to be some parity across the league, though. So whether or not it's conferences get involved or states get involved, hopefully not the federal government, but one way or another, we've got to fix a few of these problems.
Yeah, and I like how you put that too. I do think it boils down to leadership, whether it be, like you said, maybe boiling down to where the schools need to step up and make something for their players. But then some schools are just kind of getting out of line. I feel like there's some schools that, you look at the way that they're doing it and paying the players so much more, it almost creates a disadvantage, because you think of the smaller schools that can't offer as much as other schools could. Some of these bigger schools are now pulling the recruits that are even, are even maybe a bigger recruit for a small school, now pulling them away just because of those extra things. I've always said I totally love the idea of NIL. I think you should be able to get paid for your name, image, and likeness. And if you have a revenue in the market gives you an option to make that money, I think you should be able to. But yeah, I think there does need to be some sort of leadership to step in. And like you said, it was rolled out, but no real rules or stipulations to the NIL, which kind of makes it really crazy. I think that's why it's gotten so out of hand.
Yeah, and an important distinction to understand is NIL stands for name, image, and likeness, right? Which has always been a third-party play. Let me give you an example. If Dr. Pepper, wants to hire Bryce Young to be in their commercials, the University of Alabama, where Bryce Young played, is not involved in that at all. And that was not an option when I was playing college football. And those are some things that some of my teammates and I looked around and said, especially jersey sales. Now, jerseys don't have a guy's last name on it necessarily, so that's how schools get around that. But it never sat right with some of us that I couldn't accept a free lunch from a booster or sign my autograph and get paid $100 for it, when a random guy in my math class could do that. Like, why is that? That's not right. So that's name, image, and likeness. That is completely separate from pay for play, where a school now has these collectives and they say, we want this guy. He's the top recruit. Let's pay him $250,000. And now we can do that openly, and we don't have to hand it to him in a McDonald's bag, and then he will come and play for our school. Well, what happens then? There's no answers on what happens then. How long does the kid have to play there? Does he have to play in bowl games? Does he have to stay there for 3 years? Does he have to stay there for 4 years? We don't have any answers on any of this right now, and that's what's getting out of control.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things like that I look at and I'm thinking, how could we have ever allowed this to get this far without some sort of rules? Because there was no rule book given out. There was no handbook that says you can do it this way or that way. And I think that's where it's just gone so far. But kind of looking over on the other side of things, not only is there NIL that's kind of making college football very crazy and maybe even turning some fans away, I suppose, but a lot of people are also looking at the transfer portal and seeing how far that's gone, which even when you were playing, you still had a transfer portal of some sort, but there was a little more of a requirement for when and how you transfer. And a lot of people look at the transfer portal now with how easy it is to get out and go to a new school. They kind of look at it as the transfer portal is just for quitters. But do you think that the transfer portal is good for college football? And do you think it needs to be a little less accessible for the guys that just get out and leave for absolutely no reason or very little reason at all?
Yeah, and I asked this exact question to Arkansas head coach Sam Pittman, which we ran yesterday. So I would encourage everyone to go check out Coach Pittman's answer on Crane and Company. But this is yet another example, which I know is why you're asking this in tandem with the NIL question. It's another example of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Again, when I was playing college football, there was something about the idea that, well, my head coach at any time could go take another job at a place and leave whenever he wants. But if he does that, the guy who recruits me, I can't then do that. When I transfer, I have to sit out a year. That was essentially what it was. If you're a Division I athlete and you transfer on the Division I level, you have to sit out a season. And if you transfer within the same conference, you have to sit out for 2 years. Now, you did not have to sit out if you had already graduated and you're going to be a fifth-year senior, a la Russell Wilson leaving NC State and going to Wisconsin, or if you went down a level to play Division I AA or Division II. Well, again, there was room to say, hey, if you have a family member back, I went to school 1,000 miles away from where I was from. If you have a family member that's sick, or if the head coach or position coach that recruited you then leaves, that's what happened to me. I went there because Lloyd Carr and Scott Leffler were the head coaches or were the coaches, and we ran a drop back system at the University of Michigan. Rich Rodriguez comes in. It meant that I was not going to be the starting quarterback at Michigan for sure. Not that I necessarily would have been anyway with Coach Carr, but you get my point on the issue. That would have been a great opportunity for me to be able to transfer without penalty because I had already redshirted on the same level. But that's not what we're dealing with here. I mean, we have kids now who just, they can just show up to campus, be there for a couple of weeks, get homesick, and then transfer to a different school. I don't think that we are instilling all the positive aspects of college football, when you allow a kid just to be able to transfer at any given time for whatever reason. Again, it seems like the type of issue that could be improved with just a modicum of leadership and just a few principles. Like, for instance, maybe the transfer portal window shrinks. Maybe guys who have been on campus for at least 18 months or maybe even 2 seasons, maybe they can transfer. Maybe it's, only you can transfer after your freshman year if your head coach leaves. I don't know. There seem to be a number of things that can happen. But the way it is now, it's just going to encourage more and more collusion especially within a conference. And again, to the main point, it's going to hurt parity. What all college football fans want to see is more parity across the country. And I think to truly do that, which is an entirely separate conversation we can have later, is there are just too many teams vying for one championship. I mean, there's a reason that the NFL, the MLB, the NHL, the NBA, all of those leagues have about 32 teams in them. We have over 100 teams here in college football vying for one national championship. Obviously, there can only be so much parity when that happens. But one way or another, I think there are a few things we can do with the transfer portal that could improve it in a week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you bring up the collusion aspect of it too, just from one team to another within the same conference, where that used to not really be seen. And usually if you were going to transfer out, you were going to transfer to a different conference. And a lot of times there was rules that kept you from transferring within the same conference too, depending on the scenario. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think there needs to be some sort of rule set in place. And I think a part of me too kind of looks, and maybe I'm just more of a traditionalist. I think you and I are pretty similar when we look at both of us are kind of old souls in that way, that we like the old tradition of old, and looking at the I guess the aspect of what it teaches a guy whenever he goes and commits to something, to stay there and fight through it, even if it's not the easiest option, even if it's maybe an option that means you don't get to play so well. I think that kind of instills something good in a man, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that he gets to play football in the bright lights, I guess, on Saturday, but I think it still kind of shows something good for him whenever he can stick it out and fight through. And sometimes you see guys win positions by doing that, and I think that can be really good for guys. But
yeah, playing football at the University of Michigan was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life, and I'm proud of the fact that I stayed there for 4 years and I graduated with my degree, and I didn't tuck tail and run. Yes, I would have loved to have played quarterback and started games, and I could have done that had I gone to a different place, but I knew that if I was good enough to make it to the NFL, I could do that as a backup at the University of Michigan. And if I wasn't good enough, which it ended up that I just wasn't good enough to play football in the National Football League, that I graduated with a degree and I made some great friends, and I stuck it out. And that, combined with the fact that no one wants to feel exploited. No one wants to feel exploited. There are things that I'm not entirely opposed to a revenue sharing model. Back to the first issue we discussed, a revenue sharing model where these guys are able to make money off of the value that they're adding. If you're an 18-year-old kid and you say, I have this skill set, not only that, it's a physical skill set where there is damage being done to my body every single play. The market clearly wants to reward me for that. Why am I not able to get compensated monetarily for that? I think that is a very fair question. And the answer is because there have been all sorts of things set in place where, you have to go to college for 3 years or else you can't play in the NFL. And that, combined with the fact that there is no sort of minor league system, or there's no free market alternative to playing college football, that is, those are some barriers to entry that are then set up. And then on the collegiate side, the reason that, it's not entirely malicious that colleges aren't sharing their revenue. Think about it. They have other sports that are being funded by football. Now, if you have a football player who says, well, that's not my fault, I would rather get paid $250,000 this year for my skill set rather than a field hockey or a water polo team be funded. That's fair of them to say. Again, that is a free market principle, even though I feel like when I was in college, having those other teams and activities there was one of the best parts about going and playing college athletics. Some of my best friends were on the baseball team. Some of my best friends were on the hockey team and other sports like that. So there's just a lot of things to consider here. And I think that we can come up with some solutions if we'll just have some leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David, I thank you so much for coming on and talking a little bit about NIL and the transfer portal. We've got a lot going into coming up from the college football season. It's going to be very exciting. A lot of maybe some new faces in the college football realm whenever we see maybe the new guys stepping in, or even just the guys that are stepping up. It's going to be a very exciting season. But real quick before we let you go, tell us where we can find your stuff.
Yeah, please follow me on social media, David Adam Cohn. That's on Twitter and on Instagram. And please watch our show at Crane and Company. We're with the Daily Wire. We have a live show. We're talking college football every morning. That's 7:30 to 9 a.m. Eastern. And, you can catch all of our breakouts on YouTube, and you can listen as a podcast as well on Apple and Spotify.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right, and another huge thanks to David Cohn for jumping on. No, it's not the baseball legend David Cohn. It is the former Michigan quarterback David Cohn. He is an amazing host over at the Daily Wire's sports show, Crane and Company. So go check them out. It's definitely one of my favorites, one of my daily listens. And so huge thanks to them, because I know both David and Jake have both jumped on our show even back before we had maybe 100 subscribers. So a huge shout out to them and all that they do. But a really good conversation that I had with him too, just talking about NIL and the transfer portal and just how easy it's gotten. But we didn't really get to talk amongst ourselves about the transfer portal. So I kind of want to jump in, see if you guys have any other thoughts, because like I said, I think the transfer portal has just gotten out of hand in the aspect that it's just turned into a free agency. And I think that, just like David and I were talking about, I feel like there does need to be some sort of commitment to your school, and looking at you committed to this school for a minimum of X amount of years. And I think there are certain scenarios where I think that players should be able to transfer. I think that there are times that they aren't given what they've been promised, or maybe the coach that recruited them in ends up leaving and they want to follow that coach. I think there are some scenarios where I really like the aspect of the transfer portal, and I think there's other aspects about it that really benefit players. But what are you guys' thoughts on the transfer portal and what it's become today? I'll start off with you, Kevin.
I don't think there should be any rules or restrictions on transferring.
Okay.
If you want to say, we'd prefer that you transfer in the off season, I get it, but I didn't have to get permission from anyone to transfer when I was in college. I didn't, but if I wanted to, I didn't have to go to anyone except maybe my parents. They had to sign off on that. I don't need to get permission from anyone to quit my job. They say 2 weeks notice as a courtesy. If I wanted to, I could go on Monday and just tell my boss, hey, I quit, and leave. I think that, and also because the NCAA has decided to, I don't know if I can swear on this, has decided to screw over student athletes for years, hiding behind the student part of student athlete, while also not allowing them to benefit from being a student and all the things that allows them the ability to transfer, go where they want. I don't care what the reason is, because the NCAA before has also said, oh, no, you can't transfer. We know your mom has cancer and you want to be closer to home for that. No, we're not giving you a waiver for that. Oh, you're a second string? Yeah, you can transfer. That's fine. You thought you were going to be the starter. It's ridiculous. So this is the NCAA's comeuppance for their mishandling of transfer in the past, and now I think players should be allowed to freely move however they want. Yeah,
and I like both answers really, because like I said, I think there's so many good scenarios where we've seen Joe Burrow go over to LSU, and I'm sure Tyler was really happy that OSU missed up on that opportunity. Or you look at Kyler Murray coming over to Oklahoma, Baker coming over to Oklahoma, Jalen coming over. I guess Oklahoma is just the place for quarterbacks to transfer to. But and there's plenty of other scenarios. You think of Cam Newton and guys like that. I mean, there's a lot of great scenarios of big time players and big names and guys that have become college football legends transferring, that I really like the idea of them being able to transfer easier and without restrictions, because without restrictions, some of those players that I just mentioned could have had a much easier time and would have been able to play quicker and had more time in that offense and actually on the field. So yeah, I like both answers. I just feel like maybe with some aspect of it, especially when we're dealing with NIL, I feel today there needs to be something drawn up, maybe not with the colleges, but maybe with the NIL, whoever they're making these deals with. Hey, here's a contract that, hey, we're paying you this money to play at the University of Michigan, so we expect you to stay here for at least a minimum of two seasons, because that's what they're paying you for. I think if the NIL deals want to get specific, I think that would be a good thing. But I do like your answer, and just the fact that you should be able to leave.
That would require the NCAA, which they have to do anyway. The NCAA would have to rewrite their rules because current NIL rules state that your NIL deals cannot be tied to your enrollment at a specific university.
Which is silly to me because then we're also seeing where the universities are tied to some of these NIL deals too, which is really confusing to me. But Jay, your thoughts on kind of the transfer portal kind of tying into all of this?
Yeah, so I'm with Kevin on this one. I love that the kids can transfer. Now, this is kind of the one misconception around transfer portal. There are windows that you technically have to be in unless you're a graduate. If you graduated school, just like Kevin mentioned, if you're a graduate, you can leave anytime you want to because at that point, you can go to grad school wherever you want to go to grad school. But undergraduate, there is a window that you have to go through unless you get dismissed from the team. So that's the one thing I want everybody to recognize as far as the misconception around it. They can't enter the portal anytime they want to, but if they enter the portal outside of those windows, it's probably because they got dismissed for something like the Alabama defensive lineman that recently punched a strength and conditioning coach. He's out. And that was outside of that May window. So there's two windows. There's one right after the championship, national championship, usually about, I think it's like 40 days or 45 days. And then there's one after spring practice. And that's like another 15, it's like 15-day window at that point. But outside of that, you're not technically allowed to enter the portal unless you're a graduate. And so most of the kids we're seeing entering the portal are graduates who are not going to get any game. The other thing about the portal, too, that a lot of people don't know, I've talked to a couple of current players and some players that have actually entered the portal recently. A lot of them aren't entering because they want to. They're being told to. It's basically the staff saying, hey, you're probably not going to get any games, so if you want to play, you probably should enter the portal. And it's more so because the biggest problem is, and Kevin was spot on with this, with the NCAA not having rules in place properly, you can only have 85 players on scholarship, right? And so a lot of these schools are giving these players options like, look, we're over our scholarship number and we have to pare this down to 85 by the season starts. We could turn you into a walk-on where, technically you're paying for your own school, or you can transfer and go play somewhere else. It's your choice. But this person beat you out, so we need that scholarship back. And these scholarships are annual. So they technically can dismiss and move players back and forth when they so choose. And so because that window exists and players are encouraged to leave, it's a lot more complicated in the back end than a lot of people understand. Like I said, this is from conversations with some of the players that have gone through it, especially graduates. I'm just like, wow, didn't realize coaches were saying, hey, go. But when you think about when Coach Prime went to Colorado, he walked in there and said that he's bringing his own luggage in his Louis and encouraged kids to enter the portal because he was going to refresh that whole roster. And so that's kind of that's the portal play. And I like the portal. It's just, it gets weird for a lot of people because you just can't keep up with your favorite players. Well, you can't keep up with the players that's coming down the line. And it's more so because a lot of them are losing their jobs. Now, when NIL ties into this, Kevin's right. You can't technically tie it to the school, but come on now. There's a Raising Cane's here in Louisiana. There's not a Raising Cane's up in Ohio. If Raising Cane's is giving a kid a NIL deal in Louisiana, yeah, it's because he's playing at LSU or Tulane or something like that. They're not giving them a scholarship because they're in Ohio because there's no Canes there. And so majority of these are quote unquote tied to the school. And a lot of them are annual. It's based upon how long you're in school. And so if the kids decide to transfer out, NIL expires on this certain date and then they can re-up it. And so keep that in mind too. Most of these aren't tied to the whole 4 years because they technically can't do that. Because if a kid decides to go pro, what are you supposed to do? And none of these NIL deals, and this is the last thing I want to point out that a lot of people have missed out when it comes to NIL. If they do national brand deals, none of that stuff can follow them to the NFL. They have to do an entire new deal. So if a kid does a deal with like Nike or Adidas or something, they ain't got to wear Nike or Adidas when they go to the NFL. They have to stop at college and they have to renegotiate a new deal. So that's the good thing. It doesn't tie them past their collegiate career.
Yeah, and a lot of good things you brought up there too. A couple of them that I didn't realize too. So that's really good insight there. And The only thing that I really gained out of that is if you really want to transfer and you aren't allowed to, just punch your strength and conditioning coach in the face. But of all the coaches, I would think that would be the one coach you don't want to punch in the face, because especially if you're at Nebraska now. I can't remember, Coleman, I think is his last name, but the strength and conditioning coach that Matt Rule brought over with him over there, that dude is jacked. I would not want to try to punch that dude in the face. But Tyler, do you have some more thoughts on transfer portal and all that?
Yeah, I'm definitely all for the transfer portal. I definitely agree with David. I mean, there's definitely going to be less parity. A team can win the national championship. Before the transfer portal, you have to base more of your recruiting to rebuild, the overhaul of the NFL draft. But now you just go to the transfer portal and just pluck the best players. I think, this, off season, I think we saw a big question mark. Spencer Sanders, he was the face of Oklahoma State, and he transferred to Ole Miss where, Jackson Dart, Walker Howard in there, and I think that he's going to be buried in the depth chart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's so many good things that come with the transfer portal too, and I just think that it does get misconstrued and it gets misunderstood. But yeah, I think there's definitely pros and cons. And kind of jumping over to the chat real quick, so we do have people watching. A little shout out. Even Jeremy kind of agrees with that. There are pros and cons to the transfer portal. Blaine even made sure to comment in there. I figured one of our Ohio guys would say something to you, but Canes is all over Columbus and Columbus Metro, but they haven't given any NIL deals here that I know of. But that you picked the wrong state, but we get your point. We understand what you're saying. But even jumping up a little bit ago, we had Kevin McCarthy. He wanted a question for us to answer. He says, "Boys, I have a burning question. Is it okay to be a fan of both a Power 5 team and a Group of 5 team?" I think that's a pretty good question. What are your guys' answers?
It depends. Because some Group of 5 teams were formerly in Power 5 conferences. When they were in a Power 5 conference, if they were a big rival of a current Power 5 team, you can't be a fan of both. You got to go with historic rivalries. Now, if you're a fan of, I don't know, Jackson State and Boston College, yeah. Sure, why not?
Yeah, I like that answer. Tyler?
Yeah, fine. As long as you don't tie into it like an in-state rivalry, say like LSU fan, if you can't really be like a Tulane fan or a Louisiana fan. So I think that as long as you pick out-of-state Group of 5, I think you can be a fan of both.
Yeah. Do you think you could be like a ULM fan and a LSU fan, like kind of bounce back?
Probably. I could really care less about them.
But Jay, do you think you could be a Group of 5 and maybe like if you were like a Tulsa fan, you could still be like a Sooner fan.
Yeah, I
except
totally
for when they
agree
play
with
each other.
Fair, exactly. And I totally agree with the panel on that one. I don't see a problem with it unless you're doing like rivals. It's kind of weird to be an Oklahoma State and Oklahoma fan. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or being a Michigan and Ohio State fan. You can't really do that. It makes no sense at that point. Auburn, Alabama, those type of rivalries. But like me, I'm an Oklahoma fan. I'm a Tennessee fan. Those like the two schools I root. I have an SEC school and I have a Big 12 school. So I've always had that. Now I got two SEC schools and I don't know what I'm gonna do when we play each other. I'm just gonna when they played each other a few years back, I just kind of sat there in like neutral white and didn't wear any color just to enjoy both sides because it didn't really matter to me who won. But yeah. There's nothing wrong with being a fan of both, having a G5 as well as a P5 school. That's actually, it makes it a lot more fun. Gives you more to root for, especially if one of them's terrible.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I feel like I haven't been in that scenario, but I have been in the scenario of maybe like a completely different division. I've liked to watch North Dakota State up here quite a bit and seeing what they can do. So, I think kind of jumping around like that. But yeah, you can be a fan of whoever you want. I just think you can't be a fan. If we were to jump over and pick on somebody else named Jared, yeah, you definitely can't be an Alabama fan, Kevin.
No, Jared commented, "I'm not wearing Bama gear, but I am."
Oh yeah, no.
So
I was gonna pick on
that.
Jared a little bit. You can't be a fan of, let's say, like a North Carolina and Miami. I don't think those two go together. But just saying.
Even different sports.
Yeah, even if it is different sports, because that's weird. Like my brother is a Nebraska fan for football and pretty much everything all Nebraska, but then he's also a Kentucky basketball fan, and I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like the Jays sitting here picking Oklahoma and Tennessee being two Power 5 teams, and now they're going to be in the same conference. But man, you just got to jump all on the Crimson, man. You can't be jumping over with that Tennessee Orange. But
Plus,
no,
the Oklahoma Crimson just looks better.
Yeah,
that Tennessee Orange is disgusting.
It's beautiful. That Tennessee Orange is beautiful. It's just
it's that puke inside of a pumpkin orange.
I'd rather that orange than the burnt orange that Texas has.
Yeah, see, I just don't like orange at all, just because I've been such a Texas hater for so long that, and Oklahoma State, that, I mean, Oklahoma State's more or less like, just get out of here because we own that rivalry. Let's be honest. But, as far as Texas goes, it's just, I don't know, I just hate Texas so much that I just don't like any shade of orange. So I think you can be a fan of two different teams, especially if it's Group of 5 and Power 5. But like Kevin said, if it's like an old rival, or even just like a, some sort of an in-state rivalry or something like that, I don't know about that. I don't think you can root for both teams. But I think in Ryan's case, I think it's, I'm assuming it's probably an okay thing. But guys, let's jump on. We're going to talk specifically about players. I want to bring up some potential big players, a big player watch, but then I also want to talk about Heisman watch. So let's kind of go around the horn and kind of not only kind of emerging star players that we see as being big time star players for this upcoming season, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be a Heisman watch, but also who's maybe a Heisman watch player to kind of look out for this upcoming season. And Tyler, we'll start off with you.
West. I think that all the hype is around Caleb Williams and USC, but I think that Washington's going to be right up there in the elite town. Michael Penix coming from Indiana, he had a sensational first year with Washington, over 4,000 yards. I think that the main question for Washington is going to be their pass defense, but I think that they have the offensive talent. I think that Michael Penix is going to have another great year. So I think that Michael Penix is going to be right up there with Caleb Williams to compete in the Pac-12. Yeah,
I like that. And Michael Penix, that's a really good pick because I like Michael Penix. I liked him a lot at IU. It's just he got injured. He's got an arm. He's got a cannon on that arm. But Kev, do you have any other guys you want to kind of look at for emerging star players or Heisman watch?
I'm curious to see how Shadir Sanders and Travis Hunter do at the FBS level after Deion brought his Lou with him. I'm curious to see Sanders on the Heisman watch. Dallas Turner for Alabama, but is the one I really want to talk about. Will Anderson's gone. He is the premier pass rusher on that team now. I'm very excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, definitely. That's a couple of good players to bring up too. And like you said too, it's just the fact that they're coming over to that Power 5 level. And let's be honest, the Pac-12 has been a joke, and it's turning into a joke. But this season, the Pac-12 is pretty deep. Because even when you go down to like an Oregon State or Washington State, those aren't going to be easy teams to beat. So I think when you look at Oregon and Washington and USC, and I'm not really sure what to expect from UCLA after losing Charbonnet and DTR, but the Pac-12 is deep. So I like looking over at Colorado and seeing how they can perform against the best year that conference has seen in a long time. And of course, you're going to have Utah up there too. But Jay, you got some other players you want to bring up?
Yeah, I got two that jumps out to me. One, to me, the best quarterback in the ACC, Drake May.
Yes.
He should have us another sensational season. 4,300 yards passing last year, 38 touchdowns, and he ran for 698 yards. I'm anticipating him going for closer to 1,000 yards rushing this coming season and still throwing for over 4,000 yards. That man is a monster offensively for what the Tar Heels are doing. And I got to give it to Mac Brown. He's kind of rejuvenated himself. His old butt still's out there doing it. We thought he was washed after he basically ran out of Texas, and he's starting to change things. And so I love Drake May. I think he's the one player to really watch out for. He's going to be the one that's probably going to compete the most with Caleb Williams for the Heisman, because I don't think Caleb's going to be able to repeat. He has the capabilities, but I don't see it happening. I can see the voters trying to find a way not to give it to him, which honestly is quite disrespectful, but I digress on that. Another play to look at, LSU's Harold Perkins. My God, the kid's a monster. And 7.5 sacks as a freshman. I'm seeing double digits coming this year. I honestly could see him getting invited to New York for the Heisman as well. I think he can go up there in the 15, 16 range, maybe get closer to 20, and just be just a force to be reckoned with. Everybody's still going to watch him, but LSU's always got talent across the defensive line. And he's going to be able to be shifted around so much and do some special stuff. That's probably the one player that outside of the offensive side of the ball that may get a chance to get invited to New York for the Heisman.
Yeah. I like all the players that have been brought up, and Tyler brought up Penix up there at Washington. I like him a lot. That was one of them that I had kind of on the top of my mind. But then also sticking in the Pac-12, jumping over to Oregon and seeing Bo Nix. I know we're bringing up a lot of QBs, but I just feel like the QB position is just the biggest one to talk about because it's the most important position on the field. But yeah, you're looking at what Bo Nix did last year, really a big turnaround season for him, and it was good to see that for him. I think that he kind of got stuck in just a tough place to be at there at Auburn with Harsin still there and everything. So excited to see what he can put together for his last season up there. And I'll stick with the quarterbacks for just a moment because I want to jump over. We talked a little bit about Wisconsin. I really like what Tanner Mordecai put together down at SMU. And I'm excited to see what he can do at the Power 5 level at a full swing and seeing what he's able to do there at Wisconsin with Luke Fickell as his head coach. And then another one that got brought up, and I'm kind of surprised nobody brought him up, and it got brought up by Jared in the comments, is Joe Milton. I think Joe Milton's another good player to kind of look at over at Tennessee and kind of seeing what he's able to piece together there and what he's able to kind of bring up. I'm drawing a blank on the other player. He's a running back too, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, and I didn't have it written down in my notes. But the running back at K-State, he transferred in from Florida State. I don't know if anybody's got that pulled up, but that's another one that I'm wanting to see just because you're trying to take over for such a great running back. You're trying to take over for Deuce Vaughn. That's going to be really fun to see what he's able to do after losing Deuce Vaughn and after losing Adrian Martinez over there at K-State. Are they able to bounce back? And I think the only way they do bounce back is with Will Howard playing his absolute best at quarterback. I think he showed up really well last year, but is he able to play well enough? And are you able to use another running back to kind of bounce back from losing Deuce Vaughn? But Kevin, it looked like you were getting sick over there. What did I say there?
No, I'm laughing at a comment.
Oh yeah,
yeah, funniest thing I've seen all week.
Oh yeah. Jeremy brings up question: do you think Arch Manning could potentially be in the running for Heisman? He could in maybe 4 years, if he went through a lot of training. No, we talked about this. We talked about this on our show. I just don't see the hype in Arch Manning when you watch him play. I think it's just his last name. I think 4-star at the best, but I don't see that caliber that you're getting out of all the hype that the media gives him. But
you're talking about Trayshawn Ward. That's the running back that you're talking about at Kansas State.
Yes, that's Trayshawn Ward, because I just know that he's capable of being a good back, and in that system, I like to see what he can do. So I think that's another kind of star player, not a Heisman watch or anything, but a star player that I think I'm excited to watch. In the last season for Oklahoma in the Big 12, so it's going to be the last season I'm really fully invested in the Big 12, and so watching the other Big 12 teams and seeing what they can do. I think K-State's one of them. So are they able to kind of piece something together? But guys, let's jump through the conferences real quick. We'll start off with the Big 12 since I brought them up. We got Oklahoma and Texas, their last season in the Big 12. And then you look around, I think it's a really interesting conference overall because what are they going to be able to do? I don't think they're going to stick around much longer. I don't really think any conference is going to stick around much longer, but they're in a much better place than the Pac-12, which isn't saying much at all. And looking over at the ACC, I think the Big 12 is comparable to the ACC, but there's talks of maybe like a Florida State leaving the ACC and going over to the SEC. And I feel like there was another team from the ACC as well that was kind of in the talks of possibly leaving. But looking at the Big 12 and seeing that they bring in 4 new teams, they got Houston, Cincinnati, and then UCF and BYU, bringing in those 4 teams. I think that was a good pickup for the Big 12. I think they stayed ahead of the schedule, unlike the Pac-12. But kind of taking a look through the Big 12, some other kind of exciting things about it is that Sonny Dykes in his second year, he loses two key pieces to his offense, and their offense is really what kept them alive at all last season. Are they able to kind of keep that rolling? And on top of that, they also lose their offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley, over to Clemson. So their offense is going to look a lot different. You're going to have possibly new schemes. I'm not really sure what I haven't really looked into their offensive coordinator to know exactly who they brought in or anything like that. But you're probably going to see a huge difference in the way that their offense looks just overall, because you don't have Max Duggan, you don't have Quentin Johnston, and you don't have an offensive coordinator who's calling the calls. So looking at TCU, I think that's going to be interesting. I just brought up K-State and how much different they're going to be. Is Kansas able to put together another bowl game season? So just looking over at the Big 12, I mean, kind of give us your guys' preview. And I guess, Jay, I know you're still in the Big 12 right now with me. So, what are we looking at for the Big 12?
So to the Arch Manning question, this season, no, there's no way that he even plays this year. They've got two quarterbacks that are too good for him to go in, unless there's a lot of injuries. If there's injury situations with Malik Murphy and Quinn Ewers, then we may see Arch, but I don't think he's ready to actually take over and dominate like that. But overall, the Big 12 has got a lot of shifting this year. Now, as mentioned, Kansas, to me, has the best quarterback in the conference in Jalen Daniels. He's the best dual threat, period, passing and rushing. He can do everything himself. He's one of those players that can borderline carry your team as long as he's healthy. Following him, I give Dylan Gabriel the nod, and then you go down into Quinn Ewers, and then you've got John Rice Plumlee over at UCF. But the Big 12 is going to be really interesting because of all these new teams coming in with BYU, UCF, Houston, in Cincinnati. And luckily for Oklahoma and Texas, there's a lot of influx and change going on there. Like, Oklahoma doesn't see K-State this year, which, thank goodness, because that is the team that has had Oklahoma's number since Bob Stoops got there, because mainly Stoops and Brent Venables, all of them are former K-State guys. They both all coached there or played there at one point in their lives. And so since they're Bill Snyder disciples, K-State has always had their numbers. They don't play them this year. But Cincinnati's in flux because they have a new coach. Luke Fickell left and went to Wisconsin. UCF does have Gus Malzahn, and say what you want about him, he did compete in the SEC for a bit. He had his moments, and so they've got some solid coaching, but they still got a lot of changes they're doing there. Houston saw a mass exodus of offensive linemen leave in the transfer portal, so I don't even know who's going to play on the line. They're probably going to have a whole bunch of wide receivers trying to block. That's going to be terrible for them. But in TCU, they now have to figure out Chandler Morris at quarterback again. Because remember, Chandler was the starting quarterback when the season started, got hurt. Max Duggins got the job back after losing it, and then made a Heisman campaign type season. And so if Sonny Dykes can get Chandler Morris up to speed where he can compete close to what Max Duggins did, they brought enough players in the transfer portal to really compete, but I don't see them doing much this year. This really is Oklahoma and Texas's conference for the final year, and they have zero excuse to not win. Texas leaves the state of Texas one time, if I'm correct, this entire season. Their road games are in state, and they only have one road game out of state. Oklahoma leaves the state of Oklahoma 3 times for the road. They go to BYU, they go to Cincinnati, and they go to Lawrence, Kansas. The rest of their road games are technically around them within like a 2 to 3 hour span. So they're not even really traveling. They get on a plane twice. They don't really have far to go. And so because of that, there's really no excuse for them, both those teams, to go 10-2 and meet in the Big 12 championship. So that's who I believe is going to be there, because, like I said, there's no excuse. Everything is literally laid out perfectly for them to make that move.
Yeah, I like it, and I agree with you. I think overall, and last time I talked to you, Jay, I was really skeptical about Oklahoma, but after seeing media days and understanding like what has gone into the offseason, I'm a little more optimistic. I think I understand like why so many fans are more optimistic about BV's second year and everything. But Tyler, I mean, looking over the Big 12, I know you got a couple of big dogs coming over to bark at your LSU Tigers here soon. But no, overall at the Big 12 though, what are you kind of looking at as a preview for the Big 12 this year?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how others do. I think that UCF, out of all of them, definitely has the best chance to make some noise. Cincinnati with their new head coach, I think they have some questions marks to be answered. And then Houston losing Clayton Tune and then Tank Dell, they're going to lose a lot of offensive production. And then BYU, I just think that they're just like, what are you even doing here? I just don't think that they have the talent to compete in a conference like that. I do think that Oklahoma and Texas are probably the top two dogs. Oklahoma was 0-5 in one-score games. There's just no way. I just think that they're going to flip that script this year. Kansas State and TCU, I agree with y'all. I think that they're going to take a step down. I do Will Howard to be their quarterback. Will Howard was 4-0 that he was in, but there's just so much offensive production there. And then also with CU. And I think that a team to look out for is Texas Tech this year. I think that they really had some quality wins. They beat the crap out of an Ole Miss team that was really good last year in the Texas Bowl. So I think that their quarterback, they dealt with some injuries last year. Their defense definitely has to improve. So I think that Oklahoma and Texas, I think that Texas already has a loss on their schedule. I don't see them beating Alabama, especially in Bryant-Denny. So I think that they're going to have to run the table in the Big 12 to get there. So I ultimately think that Oklahoma and Texas, I hate to be buying to the Texas hype. I feel like every year they're trying to claim Texas is back, but every year they're going like 8-4 now. But I do think that this is the year that they get back to Dallas. But I do think that Oklahoma and Brent Venables will definitely get back on track in year 2.
Yeah, we talked about that over on our show too, how this year for Oklahoma and Texas both, you have to have a big year to feel comfortable about going over into the SEC. I feel like Oklahoma really needs to win 10 to feel comfortable, and Texas is right up there. I think they need to be winning 10 to feel comfortable, and even with looking at the schedule that Oklahoma has, they should be able to do it. But Kev, what do you got for the Big 12 preview here?
I'm looking at two teams, and only two teams really. Neither of them have any shot of winning the Big 12. Baylor. I want to see if Dave Aranda can have a bounce-back season, 12-2 in 2021 to 6-7 last year. I think he's a good coach. I think they can figure it out. There will be – I know they're not the top teams anymore. There will be a power vacuum in the Big 12 once Texas and Oklahoma leave. And I'm very curious to see if Baylor can kind of fill into that power vacuum like they looked like 2 years ago that they were going to become that next great Big 12 team.
Yeah.
And then Houston. I think if Houston has a decent, if they're bowl eligible year 1 in the Big 12, that should terrify the rest of the conference because they are in a prime recruiting location. And if they can have a pretty good year, first year Power 5, the sky's the limit for them. And it's terrifying.
Yeah. You brought up two teams that I really like coming into, when I guess being in the Big 12 when Oklahoma and Texas leave. And the other one is UCF, just because you can't look at UCF and say, yeah, but they're just a Power 5 or, a Group of 5 team anymore. They are a Power 5 team, so they have that stamp. That means a lot to players. Whenever they're coming out of high school, that Power 5 stamp does mean a lot currently. It's not going to mean a lot here soon, but right now it does. And so using that Power 5 stamp is big, and it's a great location to draw people in because you're in the state of Florida, which is a good place to recruit, but then you're also in Orlando, which is a great place to get kids to want to come. So I think UCF coming to the Big 12, I think that's one that I also think keeps the Big 12 hopes alive for now. Ultimately, I think the whole realignment is going to look a lot different when we get down to it. But right now, I think that's a really good, a couple of good teams. And Houston, you bring up Houston. I like Dana Holgerson down at Houston. I think he can do the right thing there. Will he do the right thing is the question. And I agree with you. I think if they can make it to a bowl game this year and make it through their schedule, I think because I think I capped them out. I feel like I can see them getting 7 or 8 if they really come in and play well this year. And with that, I agree with you. I think Houston is another really big one. Recruit within your state, and you're in Houston. So I mean, it's not like that's not a desirable place for kids to want to come. So even recruiting outside of your state, I think you can still get recruits down in Houston. But I guess real quick, let's pick up a dark horse winner of the Big 12 for each of us, and then also a conference winner. I'll start off because Kevin already brought them up. I feel like Baylor is a dark horse winner. I think they have a long shot to get there. But last year we saw two dark horses play it out in the Big 12 championship game, and of course the darker horse ended up coming out on top. So I'm looking at Baylor. I think they have the potential with Dave Aranda. If he can get that defense back in shape, like you said, Kevin, that they were looking like 2 years ago, I think they're a team to look at and think, man, like they can really put up a fight. And like Jay brought up, they don't play Oklahoma this year. So that's one team that you don't really have to worry about this year. So I think Baylor is kind of my dark horse. And the overall winner, I hate to say it, but looking at what Texas has been able to put together, I think my overall winner is probably going to go over to Texas, just because I'm looking at the matchup between them and Oklahoma, and I'm just not sure what to expect right now. I think that those two teams could meet up, like Jay said. But right now, I'm going to give my hat over to Texas and say that they could walk out as the Big 12 winner. But Tyler, do you have a winner and a dark horse?
I think I already hinted at my dark horse, and that's
Yeah.
Texas Tech. I think that's going to be one of the teams that can make that leap that TCU did. And I'm saying that Texas Tech is going to make it all the way to the national championship, but I think that they can definitely make a run to Arlington. And then my overall winner is going to be Texas. I just think that last year's matchup between Texas and Oklahoma, I just don't think that Oklahoma can just do a complete flip of a 180. So I think that I'm going to buy into Texas. It's probably going to bite me in the butt again, but I'm going to give it to the Longhorns winning the Big 12.
See, I think that's my strategy though. Is I'm just picking Texas because I feel like if I keep on overhyping them, they're just they're gonna cave into all the hype again. So let's throw a little horns down and kind of give them a chance. But there we go, Jay. So yeah, I mean, I think that they've got the potential to do it, but I feel like they've had the potential for so long, even back in the Tom Herman days, that man, it looks like they're just one step away from really clicking, and they didn't. But I like your Texas Tech pick a lot. That was another one. I think originally when we first did our predictions on our show, I think I said Texas Tech to win the Big 12, just because I see what Jerry Maguire is putting together down there. I like him a lot as a coach. I think he's got the potential to put that program together. But Kevin, do you have a dark horse and a Big 12 winner?
Well, since we already talked about Baylor, or you did for your dark horse, I'll be a little different. I have really liked Iowa State for a while. I really like Matt Campbell.
Okay.
I think he knows what he's doing. He can figure it out. I like them as a dark horse, and the Big 12 makes no sense half the time. Whoever the hell I pick is probably going to end up going 4-7 or something, miss a bowl game. So we'll just say Kansas State to win it.
Again,
why the hell
two-peat,
not?
huh?
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It doesn't ever make any sense. But yeah, and that's the thing about the Big 12 this year. There's not really a front runner. There's a lot of teams that have a big question mark on them. I feel like Texas Tech is one of them that has a question mark on them. Really, all four of the teams that are coming in that are new have a question mark on them. Baylor has a question mark on them. Oklahoma State doesn't look good. And even K-State and TCU, who just went there last year, have a big question mark. There's just a lot of questions in the Big 12 this year. For maybe it's just a bunch of 8-win teams in the Big 12 this year. I don't know. But Jay, who do you got winning the Big 12, and who's your dark horse?
So, of course, I'm going to be a homer in picks or whatnot. But no, let's start with my dark horse. Dark horse-wise, Kansas State. I'm totally agreeing. Will Howard going out there as a starting quarterback. Will did a really good job last year stepping in when they needed him, when Adrian Martinez went down. I think that Chris Kleiman is a fantastic coach, and he's done a fantastic job at Kansas State. Last year was probably his best team ever, especially on the defensive side of the ball. A little bit of changes coming this year with Deuce Vaughn being gone, but having Trayshawn Ward, another sub 6 foot running back, it's always terrifying at Kansas State. They always seem to find these dudes, and they always are electric. So it's going to be absurd how good they're going to look. So for me, I'm going to give the nod to Kansas State as my dark horse. I think they could potentially repeat. The good thing, like I said, for Oklahoma is they don't play them. And if they see them, it'll be in the Big 12 championship. So I think that the pivotal game for them is going to be against Texas. If they can beat Texas in Texas, I totally see that Kansas State can go ahead and close this bad boy out and make the magic happen. Now, who do I think is actually going to win the conference? I'm going to go with Oklahoma. And this is why. The one thing that made me deter away from Oklahoma is that everybody's going to give them their best shot, especially because they're leaving the conference. Same thing with Texas. All the schools that are new to the Big 12 are going to go as hard as possible at them. But as you mentioned, Josh, there's so many questions in the Big 12. You really only have four veteran quarterbacks that have really played in their systems a lot that you can really hang your hat on, from Will Howard at Kansas, Quinn Ewers, unfortunately, at Texas. He's been there for over a year, and he played for just about a full season. So you got him. Dylan Gabriel, who was the highest graded quarterback returning in PFF's grades as far as like overall performance. He second in yards behind Max Duggan's, second in touchdown. So he put up the numbers that you can expect someone to do to win if the defense shows up and becomes top 50, in which a couple of defensive players at OU have told me, yeah, this is going to be a top 10 defense in their minds because of the talent. We'll see if they can make it, happen as far as performance goes. But I don't know if I question one of the players who was on a top 2 ranked defense when he played at Wisconsin, Reggie Pearson Jr. So because of that, he sees the talent, says that they're going to be good. So you've got that, and all of the experience as far as players being at their teams. And then Chandler Morris over at TCU, there's not very many. Oklahoma State's not. They had a mass exodus of players leave, and they have a new quarterback set up. We don't know what they're going to look like. And so it's going to be between Oklahoma and Texas as far as winning the conference. They both have no excuse not to get back there. But I think Kansas State's probably going to be the dark horse that can, if they beat Texas, they're going to the Big 12 championship game. And they'll probably end up winning it, or Oklahoma can hopefully prevail.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think those two teams should win. And looking at it, those are the two that really you're right. You said it multiple times. They have no excuse, and for both of them leaving the conference, it's going to be a great thing for either of those two teams to win it out and leave the conference. But looking at it from the conference's standpoint, they are going to give it their all. Everybody else in that conference is going to give them hell to try to make sure that they don't walk out with the last conference championship as it stands. So I think that's pretty important to look at.
And look at this too with Vegas. Vegas has Oklahoma and Texas both at 9.5 wins, and they're trying to get everyone to bet the under for Oklahoma at 9.5, and they're trying to get everyone to bet the over on Texas at 9.5. I think the 9.5 right now is at like 130 juice. So for every $130 you bet, you win $100. Of course, people are going to be enticed by that. It's like 9.5. They sucked last year. I'm going to bet that under hardcore. So everybody's going to take the under. That's a trap, y'all. I'm telling you right now, that's a trap. Vegas knows they're going to kill it on everyone taking that under. So be careful. Texas over, I don't know how much of a trap it is, but we know how Texas is. Texas has been Texas since Texas has been Texas. So we're not going to question too much on that. But I feel like Vegas is betting, is baiting a lot of people to take that Oklahoma under. It just smells like the perfect trap you can set.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I like it. Overall, I mean, if we're wanting to see these games, and if you guys are ready for college football season, you got to buy tickets to be able to go into a game. And the best way to buy those tickets is by using SeatGeek. SeatGeek is sponsoring this show today, and they're an amazing service. It's one of the best ways to find tickets because you can go to SeatGeek.com and check it out for yourself, or use the mobile app. And guess what? Not only can you go over there and buy tickets and find good deals, but you can use the code BELLYUP for $20 off. So go over there and check it out and use that code to get yourself $20 off. It's an amazing way to get tickets because whenever you open up the app, not only can you see exactly where you want to where you want to sit and everything, and see and zoom in and see exactly what row you're going to be sitting in and everything, and right about where it's going to be in that row. And they kind of make it very transparent in that way, but they also make it easy to find good deals. You can use their color coding system. They've got red for if it's not such a good deal, yellow for if it's just an average deal, and they've got green to know that it's a great deal. So if you see that green dot, click on it, check it out, and I guarantee you're going to be very happy with the great deals you see at SeatGeek. So again, go over to SeatGeek.com and use code BELLYUP for $20 off your first purchase ticket. For your first ticket purchase. So go over there, use SeatGeek.com to cop all of your tickets for game day, especially whenever we talk about coming up with college football season. You're going to want to have that app ready to go. So go download the SeatGeek app on your phone and make it very easy. Another great thing about SeatGeek is that you have the tickets instantly. Most of the tickets on there all download straight to your phone. I think that's just the way to go now with technology and everything. So go check them out, SeatGeek.com, or you can download the SeatGeek app. And a huge thanks to SeatGeek for sponsoring this show. But guys, we're going to jump into the Big Ten. I know we talked a lot about the Big Ten with Connor Hayden. I did in our interview, and so we'll click over that in just a moment. But I guess before we jump into it, do you guys have much to say on the Big Ten before we jump into that interview? I guess I'll start off with you, Tyler.
Yeah, I think that looking at Big Ten East, you're pretty much going to be a top-heavy division again. You know, with they're returning with J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum. And I think that their defense is also going to be one of the best in the Big Ten. And then Ohio State is going to be with a new quarterback, and also Penn State with Drew Rowler. I know that Penn State fans have been waiting for Sean Clifford to get out of State College, and Drew Rowler has a phenomenal arm talent, one of the best recruits in the state of Pennsylvania. I think they're also going to have one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. I think that, also in the Big Ten West, I think that Wisconsin is going to be one of those teams that is going to rise from the ashes. I think that Big Ten West is going to be wide open this year. Pretty much, if you play good defense, you're going to be in that division every single week. I think that Wisconsin with Luke Fickell, and I think that with poaching away North Carolina's offense coordinator, they're going to be a team to watch this year too.
Yeah, and you said the Big Ten West is wide open this year. I feel like that's the way it is always, like every year pretty much. Yeah. And so yeah, I like that. Looking over at the Big Ten, it's going to be exciting. But Kevin, you have much to say on a preview for the Big Ten?
Two coaches are coaching for their jobs this season. It's Ryan Day and James Franklin. Two coaches who have wins. They've won a lot of games. They cannot win the big game. At times, it seems like a straight-up refusal to win the big game. So those two might be out of a job come December.
I could possibly see Franklin getting fired, I suppose. But do you really think Ohio State, the university, would fire Ryan Day?
Yes.
Really?
He can't beat Michigan.
That's tough.
If you can't beat Michigan, they have no patience for it.
Yeah, true. I mean, I don't think you're totally wrong. When you listen, because I lived in Ohio whenever a lot of this talk started with Ryan Day, and that was the first time that they lost to Michigan here recently, and I mean, I just thought it was crazy. But then it was even louder this past season when they lost. So I look at that. I think they're absolutely nuts. But I don't disagree with you. I think they would, just because that's how crazy that fan base is. They don't know a good thing when they got it. I think you just gotta. I mean, you got to stick with the 10 plus wins a season and not go away, or else if they do fire Ryan Day, I feel like they're going to be in the same trap that Nebraska has been caught in for quite some time now. But Jay, Big Ten preview?
Yeah, just as everybody mentioned, it's going to be top heavy as usual. And Kevin, you're right. I can see Ryan Day going on a hot seat, which I think is the stupidest thing in the world.
Yeah.
He'll get you double-digit wins every single season. He's competed in the playoffs. If Marvin Harrison Jr. did not get that hit in the playoffs and get knocked out of that game, they were headed to the national championship game. They were going to play TCU for the title. And that's even with a loss to Michigan. But I understand the rivalry piece, that they don't like losing to their rival. I'm sorry, Jim Harbaugh is really good at his job, and he's really good at preparing for one game. So he can get fired because of that, but that'll be dumb to get rid of him, because I don't know if you want Brian Hartline taking that job and then trying to do everything as far as CEO goes, instead of just being an offensive coordinator and the wide receiver coach. But that's totally something I can see Ohio State being dumb enough to do, is firing a guy like Ryan Day, who, I mean, honestly, has done a good job of keeping the ship right and keeping them consistent and competing and not having a whole bunch of issues. But I think it's going to be between Michigan and Ohio State. The West, of course, is always the way they are. Matt Rule's eventually going to get that bad boy turned around in Nebraska. I think he has the capabilities. The unfortunate thing for Nebraska fans is he's probably going to end up leaving. Somebody's going to poach him. Hell, honestly, Ohio State may try to poach him if they fire Ryan Day. That's probably the team that's going to be like, hey, we'll take that guy who we know can recruit, we know can win big games. And the James Franklin one, to me, is very intriguing, because I'm really curious to what exactly does Penn State really expect from their coaches? Like, what do they actually expect as far as winning goes? Because they ain't really done anything, 30, 40 years? But they're consistently up there in the 9 to 10 win season. So they're always competing. They're getting big name recruits. What makes them think they're going to win a title? I think that's the question that I have, is what is the expectations at Penn State? But it's Michigan, Ohio State, and it's the field like it always is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't really have too much more to say on the Big Ten, because I think Connor Hayden, he was very talkative in a very good way. So he had lots to say about the Big Ten, and even whenever we dove into Nebraska a little bit. Connor Hayden, the host of the Corn Crazed podcast, he is on YouTube. You can find him, Corn Crazed, if you search that on YouTube. One of the best Nebraska sports shows, and very well produced and everything. But we'll go ahead and check out the interview with Connor Hayden. All right, everybody, we bring in a very special guest. We've got Connor Hayden, the host of the Corn Crazed podcast. Connor, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. And today we're talking all kinds of college football, getting ready for the college football season to start up. It's a very exciting time for college football fans because we know that every new season means new opportunities, and just about every team has high hopes for their team going into the season. To bring you on, I know you're a big Nebraska guy, of course, the Corn Craze podcast talking all about Nebraska. So I figured we'd kind of pick your brain on Nebraska and the Big Ten.
Yeah, great idea. I've got a lot to share, so this is good timing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and start off with your Cornhuskers. My brother is a Cornhusker fan, so is my dad. So I'm surrounded by him. I live right on the border there of Sioux City. So I'm right on the border across from all of these Nebraska fans all over out here in the Midwest. And there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of buzz going around that looking at Matt Rule, that he is the guy. Do you feel like Matt Rule has shown enough in the process of this first offseason as a first-time head coach there in Lincoln, first time at Lincoln, I should say. But do you think he's shown enough to show that maybe he can step in to be that guy to kind of be the redemption story for Nebraska?
Yeah, he represents the qualities that Nebraska fans were looking for in a coach. And I think there were a lot of question marks before he had gotten hired because he had just come off a rough stint in Carolina. But we know he's done it before. And because he's done it before and there's proof in college, that gives you a little bit more confidence. Then you look at everything he's done in the offseason. He took a recruiting class that was struggling a little bit when Scott Frost had gotten fired. And he was able to revamp it and pull some guys in who fit for what he's trying to build. Then you look at the future recruiting class. He's already got him up to, I think, 21st nationally. He landed some of the best players in the state who honestly weren't going to come. It didn't look like Carter Nelson, Davon Hall, Daniel Kalen. All those were big names who were pretty much set on going to either the SEC or Notre Dame. So I think the hope comes because you've got the recruiting proof. Now you've got this coach who speaks like a Nebraskan. He talks to what we want to hear. He talks about the fullback. He talks about establishing the run game, winning in the Big Ten the right way, because there are ways to win in this conference. And Scott Frost never really figured that out. So yeah, I think he's shown enough this offseason that we can say, okay, here are 4 or 5 points that make us believe that this guy's legitimate and not just another big name who you're paying a lot of money to, like a Mel Tucker.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look at what he has done, like you said, recruiting alone has been a big game changer. In the way that he's been recruiting, he's been on the trails, hitting it hard and trying to go after guys. I also think he's gone really well in the transfer portal, getting guys. If you can draw guys from Georgia, that's not a bad place to be stealing them from.
Yeah, no doubt. And when you look at the transfer portal from last year, there was so much excitement and hype for Casey Thompson and some of the other guys that they were able to pull in on defense, like Omar Brown. And it didn't feel like there was a plan to bring guys in who fit their system. They just went and tried to pull the best guys they could. Matt Rule went and found guys who fit for what he's trying to build. I know Corey Collier came from Florida. He didn't get to play there. Same with Chief Borders, but I think they fit for this 3-3-5, and they're lanky, they're fast. And because they fit the system, there's a better chance they're going to play. So I like the transfer portal strategy this year under Rule than what we saw in 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at just his mentality, like you said, I think he does fit the Nebraska role pretty well. I guess looking at the Huskers with their first year under Matt Rule going into this upcoming season, I think they have a favorable season when you look at their schedule, a favorable schedule, and it's a very good schedule to start off with. You're not having to go against a lot of the tough teams that you normally have loaded up in your Nebraska roster, I guess, in the Big Ten there. So looking at the schedule, what do you think should be the expectation for Nebraska fans coming into Matt Rule's first year?
Yeah, I don't want to give a record prediction right now. I'm still doing my research on it, and I want to make sure that I give the best number I can, right? I think when we're talking about the expectations, I just dropped a video actually 30 minutes ago where I outlined some of the things that I think he needed to correct this offseason, and then some of the expectations we as fans should have. And some of the things I didn't mention in that video, which I think I can mention now, I think we're going to see better play calling and game management. I think we're going to see better tackling, better ball handling, and the fundamentals are going to be something that this coaching staff puts more emphasis on. The close games that we saw last year, I think, are going to flip from losses to wins. And I think that winning those close games is going to shift this record from a losing one to a bowl team, essentially. And I think ultimately, overall else, teams are going to start to take them seriously, because even if they start 3-2 with losses to Michigan, they would lose to Minnesota as well in that scenario. teams are going to look at Nebraska on their schedule and say, geez, this is a team who could beat us legitimately, not a team who's just going to be somebody who rolls over like they did in the past. They're not going to have the weak offensive and defensive line that we see fold. I think they're going to be a little bit tougher in the trenches. So I think it's a bowl team. I don't know exactly how many they're going to win. I do think if I was going to give a ceiling, there is 9 win potential. And it sounds ridiculous. And everyone's going to say, people just get hyped up in Nebraska every single year. But look at the schedule. I've got it pulled up right here. You've got Minnesota, who's regressing. You've got Colorado, who is taking a step forward, but they're a bottom feeder on the schedule. NIU, who's going to take a step forward, and Louisiana Tech as well, but neither of those teams should be able to compete in Lincoln. Michigan's the one team who you're not going to beat, most likely. But after that, Illinois regressing, Northwestern regressing, Purdue regressing, Michigan State, they're going to take a step forward, but how good can they be? Maryland, they lost a lot of guys. They brought some in the portal, but I don't see them as a team who's going to be a big problem when Nebraska plays them at home. You've got Wisconsin and Iowa, who are the 2 front runners for the Big Ten West, but both beatable. So I think this is a really favorable schedule. It's really exciting to be a Nebraska fan right now. And if Matt Rule could have had any draw, I think this is what he would have hand selected before he got hired.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's a schedule that you really want when you're coming in as a first year head coach. You want a schedule that can kind of build you up and kind of give you a better morale. I think morale is probably the best tool to use as a first year head coach. But let's jump around in the Big Ten real quick and kind of look at maybe a couple of the top dogs, the 2 that are really always going to be looked at as the top dogs for the Big Ten. And you look at Ohio State, Michigan. We'll start off over with Michigan just because I personally feel like I've got higher hopes for Michigan than Ohio State, just because you see what they've got returning. They have JJ McCarthy, who came off of a very hot ending to his year, beating Ohio State, and still didn't look bad at all in that game against TCU. I think he still put up pretty good numbers, and you can expect him to be working in the offseason to get to a better point this season with JJ McCarthy. And then, of course, you've got JJ McCorum and even Donovan Edwards, the 2 backs that are highly regarded in the Big Ten and across all college football. Getting all of that offensive power back, plus you didn't lose a whole lot on defense. What do you see with this Michigan team as far as what their ceiling could be and what they could be able to put together in the Big Ten this year?
Michigan's so odd because I think it now comes down to coaching, right? You've got a team who has now gotten to the playoff back-to-back years. They were uber talented in both situations. The key factor now is going to be JJ, and I think this will be his final season. He could be a first-round draft pick next year is what I've been reading. Their offensive line is solid. They brought in 3 guys from the portal who've all started at other schools. Like you said, you've got Blake Corum and you've got Donovan Edwards, who are both NFL-type running backs who could both win the Heisman if they were playing on different teams. So I think it comes down to what can this coaching staff draw up to figure out how to beat Ohio State again, because that's going to be a nightmare. Obviously, they got to play Penn State, who has a really strong defense. They got blown out last year, but I think they could be a team who fights. And then when you do get to the playoff scenario, is Penn State going to have the scheme to beat some of the big teams like a Georgia, Bama, whoever else is in there? Or do they fold again and they give up a big lead and they can't pick up the pieces at the end? I don't know. I think that's a coaching question, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, because it ultimately does come down to what's your coaching going to do, because there is no question about what kind of talent they've got there. Definitely a powerhouse when it comes to the talent that they've been able to surround themselves with. But then you jump over in that rivalry against Ohio State. I feel like it usually comes down to who's going to make it to the Big Ten championship game, just by that big game that we all watched there in the last game of the season. And with Ohio State, it does look a lot different than what we're seeing with Michigan, where Michigan is returning a lot of pieces. Ohio State's having to fill a lot of pieces. They're going to have to fill the position of one of their number 1 wide receivers. And I say one of just because I feel like they've always got a number 1 receiver hiding somewhere in there. And we see it. Their number 1 receiver this year was obviously shining big time last year in Marvin Harrison Jr., but losing CJ Stroud, so you're losing a quarterback. That's a big piece of not just your offense, but your entire team. What do we look at over at Ohio State on the other side of that rivalry? What do we see with Ohio State? Do we think that they can still piece together a team to still have that 11-win season and make it to the playoffs and maybe redeem themselves from last year?
Yeah, I think every year Ohio State's going to win 10 games, right? They're still in the peak for Ryan Day, and I don't think they're going to fall off and go down to 9 wins or 8 wins or have some issue just because they're flipping quarterbacks. We saw CJ Stroud struggle in his first year. He wasn't great, and he lost the game early to Oregon at home. Could we see the same scenario this year? They have to play at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame now has a really good transfer quarterback who came in, and Sam Hartman, and they want revenge for last year. So, and again, they're a team who's on the up and up. They've had their coach now for a couple of years. So I think the Notre Dame game could be somewhere they slip, the Michigan game, obviously, and then they got to play Penn State. The offensive line has to be rebuilt a little bit. The quarterback room, like we talked about, but all of their skill on offense stays the same. Their defense is now in their second year under their DC, who came over from Oklahoma State, and he wasn't elite last year, but their defense was serviceable in most situations. The coaching isn't really as much of a question as I think it is at Michigan. It's more so which elite players can step up on the line and at quarterback, and who's going to make that biggest impact to get them back to where they've been for these last few years, which is in the playoff.
Yeah. And I was talking about Ohio State earlier today, and just looking at who we know that Ohio State is. Like you said, I don't really see them falling under 10 wins, even in a season where they're having to rebuild a little bit as far as, like I said, quarterback position being the central part of your offense. But it's just funny when you look at Ohio State in years when they had their top two quarterbacks get hurt and still made it to the national championship and win it with a third string quarterback, and seeing how packed full they are there. And then on top of that, even on years where Joe Burrow, who is a one of the best quarterbacks to have ever done it statistically, even he isn't able to play at Ohio State, goes on to win a national championship somewhere else, and seeing just all the talent that they're constantly putting out. But I totally agree with you. I don't think there's too much to worry about for Ohio State fans, even though I think that they don't realize a good thing when they've got it, I guess, even though they're calling for Ryan Day. But I think that'd be a silly mistake. But to look at another team in the Big Ten right now that's got a new head coach, a head coach that I've got a lot of hope for. I think he's got a lot to be able to work with there, and that's over at Wisconsin. Looking at Luke Fickell, first year at Wisconsin, I know that a few people, including myself, would probably pick Wisconsin as one of those sleeper teams that could make it to the Big Ten championship game, mainly because of the schedule that they face, and because we know what the transfer portal has done for them, and we know what their head coach is capable of. Do you see Wisconsin being one of those teams that could surprise everybody, making it to that Big Ten championship and putting up a fight this year?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's a surprise. I think they're a preseason top 25 team, and I think that they have a quarterback who's done it now for years. Their coach has proven it multiple times now that he's been at Cincinnati, and he was at Ohio State before. So he shows that he can coach elite talent. I don't think they're going to have a struggle getting back to where they should be. I think the only question is, what's the offense going to look like? Because they brought in North Carolina's OC who likes to throw the ball. So that's going to be a little funky. But outside of that, we know it's proven on all levels, coaching, player-wise. Speaking of players, they bring back 10 starters on offense. I think they bring back 7 or 8 on defense. They have the best running back in the country in Braylon Allen. I mean, they're loaded everywhere. I don't think they're going to have any trouble getting to the Big Ten championship. And if I had to put a bet on it, I think that's who I would pick right now.
Yeah, and I like it. And honestly, I would like the chances of looking at Wisconsin. Let's say that they go against Michigan or Ohio State, who obviously is the favorite to go to it from the East. I wouldn't put it past Luke Fickell to surprise everybody and be able to maybe walk in there with maybe 10 wins, but still upset somebody in the Big Ten championship game. It's not something I would necessarily put my money on, just because I know how powerful both of those programs can be, but definitely something to look at. And like you said, too, bringing in a couple of quarterbacks with them from the transfer portal, one directly from Oklahoma, and then their starter, they're most likely going to be starter in Tanner Mordecai, came from Oklahoma, but then transferred to SMU. And just knowing that he comes from Oklahoma and who he got recruited by says quite a bit about him. Tanner Mordecai getting recruited by Lincoln Riley, who's known as a QB whisperer for sure. And
you can just look at his stats. His stats have shown what he has the potential to do. And any questions there were in spring and people trying to say Tanner Mordecai might not live up to what they had hoped they had gotten, I think that's all kind of BS. He's going to be a stud there. The other thing is, I think if Nebraska wouldn't have gotten Rule, the second choice would have been Fickell. So that's going to be interesting to watch over these next few years. Who turns their program around faster? Who gets them to the mountaintop? And who's the coach who ends up being the superior coach? I think is the question that we're all looking to learn.
Yeah. And that was definitely one of them that was high up on my list for coaches looking around the nation. I know a lot of people were kind of hoping that Luke Fickell would have been the guy if it wasn't going to be Urban Meyer, I suppose. But
Yep.
you're right. It does bring up not just a battle of the two teams, but battle of the two coaches to see which new coach can really put something together faster. I think that'll be a lot of fun to look at and to watch that kind of burn into a maybe a fan rivalry rather than an actual rivalry, because I'm sure both coaches are probably rooting for each other in some fashion, just not whenever they're going against each other.
Yeah, you want your other coaches in your conference to be good because you want to beat the best guys, right? So I know they're rooting for each other to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking into the Big Ten, I think there's other teams that we could talk about, like Penn State, and the amazing program that they are probably always going to have. It seems like even in their down years, it was really just because trying to find the right coach to fill in for one of the greatest that they've ever had, and I guess the greatest they've ever had. But Penn State has definitely brought themselves back up. I think they're another team to consider. But whenever we look at some of the great programs that have come out of the Big Ten and made it the Big Ten championship, we look over at Michigan State, a great program historically, but last year seems like they took a very big step back. And you mentioned them just a minute ago, talking about the Nebraska the schedule. And you believe that they're going to have a little bit of a bounce back. How much of a bounce back do you think Michigan State is able to have?
Well, I think that they're in a better position to succeed now because they have their transfer portal players who've been there now for a couple of years. They've been developing the guys who they've been recruiting straight out of high school. Now you're in Tucker's third season. They lost a lot of talent and they lost some depth. And I think last year they lost their identity because you had Kenneth Walker back in 2021. And Kenneth Walker was a guy who ran their entire team, right? He was their entire offense. I think he had a couple of games where he went for over 200. So he obviously became a really good running back in the NFL. So yeah, I think they're going to find that their identity is more of a balanced attack. They're going to figure out if their quarterback has it in him to throw the ball around. And if he does, they've got Malik Carr at tight end. And I'm sure they're going to find some other receivers because it seems like they always have receiver talent. It's just who's going to be the stud who pops out now that Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed are both gone.
Yeah, and looking at the contract that Mel Tucker got to, I'm sure Michigan State, the administration anyways, is just really hoping that this can be the year that he finally bounces something around. I think he's going to have to do something pretty big to really make them happy.
The contract never made sense. I think what happened with the contract was they got nervous because so many big name coaches, Lincoln Riley, for example, were getting these massive max contracts like NBA players. And because they were handing these contracts out left and right, you had to make sure if you had a coach who could be poached, you wouldn't let him get taken from you. So they were in a position where, do we roll the dice on Mel Tucker and say, we're going to commit to him for the long run? Or do we let someone else take him? Because that's ultimately what would have happened. A Nebraska could have come in, for example, and just like they did with Matt Rule, given him the same amount of money that Mel Tucker got. So, or that Michigan State offered him. So I think they took a massive risk, but they said, we're going to buy in and live with him for a while. So hopefully it pans out, but he hadn't done anything up to this point to deserve that outside of one big year with Kenneth Walker. Before that, he was a DC. He had coached in the NFL. He had been at Colorado where they didn't really do anything. So yeah, it was a risk they were willing to take for whatever reason. And yeah, we'll see if it pans off in the next 3 to 7 years.
Yeah. And a newer coach, I think he's going in his third year, if I remember correctly. I didn't pull that up to double check myself, but looking over at Illinois and Brett Bielema, what he's been able to do there. Of course, the Big Ten knows Brett Bielema. They know that what he's capable of. Talking about Wisconsin just a moment ago, he did great there whenever he was over there and working with Wisconsin as a head coach. But now going to Illinois, I think last year he really showed up and showed that he can bring Illinois of all teams in the Big Ten to be a team to fight against, and a team not to just look at lightly and just kind of breeze right past them, but they can be a powerhouse, at least a powerhouse to maybe upset some big teams here and there along the way. And he shows his defensive identity a lot, and he brings back that same style that I think succeeded at Wisconsin whenever he was there. With Brett Bielema over at Illinois, I guess what can people kind of look around for from Illinois going forward? Do you think that he's going to keep on building on what he had from last season, or do you think maybe he starts to take a step back?
Okay, so I think record-wise, they take a step back. However, I think that they're going to build and become a better team as the years go on. Brett Bielema is a Big Ten coach, the epitome of a Big Ten coach. He focuses on the trenches. He focuses on defense and running the football. He knows how to find the right running backs and develop them. He got lucky with his running back last year, who was a stud. He had some really good defenders on the back end, especially a DB. The one question mark now is he lost so much on offense and, well, outside the receiver, he lost his starting quarterback and his starting running back, a couple guys in the offensive line. But on defense, they lost their DC, who you got to credit Walters to what he was able to do, because it was only 2 years, I think, since that coaching staff got hired. And he was able to take a defense who was really whatever and turn them into one of the better defensive backfields in the entire country. With Walters being gone, with Bielema losing his running back and his quarterback, having to replace so much in those skill positions, is he going to be able to win 8 games? Because 8 games would be a step forward, right? 7 games would be similar to last year, and then 6 would be technically regression. I'm going to guess they win 6 this year. I think they lose to Kansas because I think they play that one on the road early, and Kansas is one of the best teams, in my opinion, when it comes to the Big 12. So I say best teams, but I think they're in the upper echelon, maybe the fourth or fifth best team. But still, I think they're a solid team with 10 returning starters on offense and I think 8 on defense. Anyway, I don't want to get down the rabbit hole. The point is, Illinois is going to have some struggles. They aren't going to be able to win every single game like they did last year, where they just dominate and punish teams with their run game. I think they're going to have to figure out some different ways to win. And yeah, we'll see if they can get to 6. But long-term vision for them is 8, 9 win consistently. And that would be incredible for Illinois.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're an Illinois fan, you have to be pretty happy with that overall, especially looking up from what your program came from. I think that's something you can be pretty content with overall, and kind of building from there. But I guess I know you said you didn't make any predictions yet. I guess, are you okay with making a Big Ten championship prediction?
2 teams I think will be in the championship game.
Yeah. Or even just a champion overall, if you prefer to just pick one champion.
I think that's too easy, right? I think we got to say, man, it's really who wins the Michigan-Ohio State game. So I think I'll say Michigan wins in that Ohio State game, which means they represent the East. In the West, I got to take Wisconsin or Iowa. It really comes down to schedule, where they play each other, when they play each other, because I think that game will determine the West champion. I would say Nebraska has a better chance to beat Iowa than they do Wisconsin this year. And because of that, I'll put Wisconsin, because Nebraska might be the team who decides that. So I'll put Wisconsin in the championship game. Michigan wins it. Wisconsin ends up as a 9 or 10 win team and in a really good bowl game. And Michigan is back to the playoff.
I like it. Do you have a dark horse of who could make it to the Big Ten championship?
Dark horse? I mean,
maybe not to win it all, but maybe just to make it there.
I would say Nebraska. I really believe in Nebraska this year, and I think they might finish ahead of Purdue, Illinois, Minnesota. And if they do, that could put them in a position where they got to beat Wisconsin or Iowa. And if the cards fall the right way, they could end up right in there. It's a long shot, but it's possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I like kind of throwing it out there too. Like, oh, let's pick a dark horse and see who might be able to squeeze their way in.
Last year, I would say that Minnesota or Purdue would have been my dark horses based on all the talent they had returning, but they're going to regress this year, in my opinion. So Nebraska.
Yeah, I liked Purdue a lot last year, and I agree with you. I think they're kind of take a step back. I don't really like their coaching hire that they got in either, and so we'll have to see where everything goes. But it's going to be an exciting season. Connor, we thank you so much for coming on. But tell everybody where we can find your stuff.
Yeah, you can just go on YouTube, type in Corn Crazed, or type in my name, Connor Hayden, and you will find a bunch of content, me talking about Nebraska football, Big Ten football. I have a secondary channel where I talk about sports betting called Bro Throw. It's my biggest sponsor. So that's obviously fun for me because I love to talk about betting on all these games every week. So I've got a bunch of content out there you can find if you search up my name.
Absolutely. Well, Connor, again, thanks so much for coming on and talking a little bit of Big Ten football with us.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Yep. All right, everybody. That was Connor Hayden from Corn Crazed Podcast, one of the top Nebraska podcasts out there on YouTube. But we had to let Kevin go. He was getting himself in a little bit of trouble staying on any longer. So huge thanks to Kevin for joining us and everything. But anyways, guys, let's go ahead and jump over to the SEC real quick. I know this show went a little longer than I was hoping. I was hoping maybe an hour 45, but we can still cut it a little short. We'll touch up real quick on the SEC and ACC and then go into our playoff predictions. But let's start off with the SEC. Tyler, since you're an LSU fan and currently in the SEC, we'll let you start us off.
Yeah, I think that the East two teams I'm really looking forward to watching is how Georgia is with the production they're going to be losing, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But they have one of the easiest schedules in college football. If you look at their non-conference and if you look at the SEC, they'll be hosting South Carolina. Really, the only main challenge that they'll get is going to be in Neyland Stadium in Tennessee. So I think that Georgia's going to cakewalk to another 12-0 win season. I think they're going to be back in Atlanta. And I think in the West is definitely going to be an interesting story, especially with Alabama losing Bryce Young. Who's going to be their quarterback? Is it going to be Tyler Buckner? Is it going to be Jalen Milroe heading into this year? And then at LSU, I think that it's a story. The media is not picking, which is definitely surprising to me. But I think that LSU definitely has the talent. They won it in year one. They can definitely do it again in year two. I think that Jaden Daniels really had a good. I definitely think he has to improve as a passer if LSU wants to make it back to the college football playoff. But I think that really the main concern is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. You know who you guys are with Harold Perkins in the middle. And then you're returning Mason Smith, who is going to be an absolute animal. He's going to be looking for a little bit some revenge in that first game. The last season he got hurt in the first drive. I think that the cornerback is also going to be a big concern too. It's going to be a big overhaul again. You lost some guys to the transfer portal in the NFL draft, but you're able to get Denver Harrison. You got Deuce Chestnut from Syracuse. So you got some guys coming in, but the team chemistry is going to have to work itself out. And then outside of that, you have teams like they're definitely going to be interesting with their offense. Arkansas, KJ Jefferson coming back. But in the end, I think that Georgia will be the two teams to make it to Atlanta.
Yeah, I like LSU quite a bit, and I agree with you. I think I'm picking them to win it, and I'll make my statement. I feel like looking at the SEC this year, I feel like there's got to be a shakeup. And LSU is one of the teams. I think they're expected to be there this year just because of what they did last year, first year for Brian Kelly. But my team on the other side would, I want to say Georgia because it just feels right. But I'm going to shake it up and say Tennessee finally comes out and puts it together. And I'm going to root for the Vols to come away with it and make it to play. And I think LSU wins the SEC championship overall. I feel like Alabama is going to be on one of their down years, which means they still win 10, maybe 11 games. But I think LSU's going to be good enough to be able to jump up ahead on that side of the bracket to be able to win the SEC overall. So I like LSU a lot this year. They're actually one of them. We'll get to it. They're one of them that I like nationally quite a bit this year. So I think it's a really good year for LSU. But Jay,
yeah, I'm in the boat that I think LSU. Of course, I'm in agreement with you both. The LSU will end up winning the West. I think bringing back the quarterback and Jaden Daniels and everything that looks like it's coherent. It actually looks like there's some stability there, even with the recent stuff that's kind of gotten in the news about LSU. I think that's going to be just fine. I see LSU winning their division. And honestly, I'm with you, Josh. I think Tennessee pulls out the East. The big questions I have with Georgia and Alabama are at the quarterback position. Georgia has a tendency of bringing in a bunch of five-star quarterbacks, and then they never pan out. The last one they had that actually really panned out was Matt Stafford. Jake Fromm didn't really do much that we thought he was going to do. Jacob Eason transferred. Justin Fields transferred. They got Brock Vandagriff on the bench, and I'm thinking he's probably going to end up transferring because he's not going to play this year. It seems like he's down in the depth chart. And so that I don't know what their quarterback position is going to look like. Similar to Alabama, if you got three quarterbacks, that means you have zero quarterbacks. And so because of that, they've got to figure out what that's going to look like. I don't know if they have confidence in Jalen Milroe there at Alabama. And then both teams have new offensive coordinators. And so we're going to be seeing a whole new setup for them this coming season. The stability at LSU, the stability at Tennessee, bringing in their quarterbacks into the same system for a second or third year, I think that's going to help them propel even past the defenses to be a little bit more successful this year. So I think Georgia and Bama is both going to have 10-win seasons, no doubt. I think their one loss is going to be to like Tennessee and LSU, which would hurt their bid for the conference championship. And honestly, I think LSU does end up winning the SEC this year. That's kind of what my prediction has been as well. The rest of the field, they still got a lot of work to do, a lot of things to figure out. Ole Miss still has like 5 quarterbacks, which means they have no quarterbacks. Arkansas should win 10 games this season. Their schedule is built perfectly to win 10 games. And South Carolina probably has a chance to do something. So Rattlers coming back as well. But I'm going to LSU and Tennessee in the SEC championship game. I think LSU wins it.
Yeah, and you bring up Arkansas. I think Arkansas, Sam Pittman has said that they've changed a lot of things here in the offseason too to try to fix what was broken last year and what seemed like it just wasn't working. So Arkansas is another really good team to look at. But let's kind of jump over real quick over at the ACC and check out the ACC. Personally, I'm looking at the ACC and I'm thinking there's no way Florida State doesn't come out with a huge year this year because they return a lot of guys. They've got the same coaching staff. They didn't really lose a whole lot when you look at their team as a whole. I like Florida State a lot. I think I've always kind of had the I guess the faith in Norvell being able to turn Florida State around. And at first, it just didn't look like it was going to happen. And finally, last year, he showed that. I think they looked really good against LSU, which proved to be a better LSU team than what we thought they were going to be. And so I think they looked really good against a very good team. And then looking at what they've got to build on, I think I like Florida State to win it all over there. And I think Clemson's going to be another team to look at in the ACC. I think Clemson is back. I know Tyler brought up his concerns with Clemson's offense a little bit this year, but I'm looking at their offense. I think getting rid of DJU was a huge upslope. I think not having him on the team, he just was not consistent enough for that offense. I don't think he fit well with that scheme where now they've got a quarterback that they can rely on. And so looking over there, I like Clemson quite a bit. And not only that, but adding Garrett Riley on as your offensive coordinator is a huge boost. So I think looking over at their offense, I think their offense is going to be much better than it was last year. And then looking over at their defense, I think they're going to have one of the best defenses we've seen for a while, at least since they've gotten rid of Brent Venables for sure. So I think we're gonna see a good defense from Clemson. So I'm kind of looking over there, and I think North Carolina is another team to look at as being in the contention, but they have to find something on defense because we can all throw shade at Oklahoma or really the entire Big 12 for having bad defense for such a long time. But North Carolina's defense was pathetic last year. They might as well have just not thrown anybody on the field at times, especially when you look at that Appalachian State game and see what they did there. So looking over at North Carolina, I think they can get there, but they're going to have to put together something on defense. We all have faith in their offense, but offense does not win championships. So I'm going to go with Clemson and Florida State. Those are my two teams. And I think when you look over at Miami, I'm really interested to see what Miami does. I want to see how they're going to bounce back. Is Mario Cristobal going to have another season like he did last year? Because if he does, I wouldn't be surprised if they just boot him right away. I think he's on a hot seat already with how he performed last year. Last year was terrible. That was worse than anybody expected from Miami. And now you're losing recruits. You're even losing some recruits that are within the same city to guys that, I know that they lost a Miami recruit over to Nebraska here recently. So just a lot of things going down there in Miami. I think this has to be a big bounce back year. I don't think you have to do anything special, but you have to show up this year. So I think looking at Mario Cristobal, I would hate to see that happen to him because I think he's a great coach, but I think he does need to show up and do something a little better this year. But Tyler, what do you got going for the ACC this year?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting conference to watch. This is going to be the first year that there's going to be no division. So, North Carolina, like you mentioned, their defense is just not where it needs to be. And, they definitely have one of the best offenses in the conference, especially with Drake May. I'm just very high. I'm drinking Kool-Aid on Florida State this year. They really proved a lot last year. I think it's going to really carry win the ACC. I do think that Clemson, their defense is going to travel. They're going to win some ball games. Their offense, their receivers is just something we're used to. We saw T. Higgins, the D Hops of the world, the C. Watkins. They just don't really have any star power. Yeah, Will Shipley at the running back. So I think that Clemson and Florida State will be in the ACC championship. I think that the Noles will win it and potentially make it to the college football playoff this year.
Yeah, and it's good whenever you see those historical programs. It's good for college football to see them bounce back and have the good seasons again. So I'm really excited for Florida State and kind of seeing what they've got put together and everything too. And the only thing with Florida State is, can you win the game in the beginning? Can you start off strong? Because last year it felt like they had to fight back from being behind too much. So can you bounce back a little better? Can you be a better team to start the game rather than trying to fight back late in the game to win it? But Jay, what do you got for the ACC?
I'm kind of in the same boat as you all. I'm honestly with Florida State. Jordan Travis returning is big for me. I think it's between returning quarterbacks and the ones that perform. Drake May, Jordan Travis, and then Cade Klubnik. I'm not low on Klubnik like a lot of people are. I do believe it's going to be a battle really between those three. And honestly, I'm really thinking Florida State can pull this out. Their defense is still stout. Jared Verse didn't leave, which I am still baffled the dude decided to come back to college when he was really a top 10 guaranteed in the NFL. But somebody talked him into it, and he's back. So I think that having Jared Verse come back and then adding in a quarterback like Jordan Travis who can do a lot of stuff. Overall, Mike Norvell's done a fantastic job of recruiting. I see this team winning another 10 games. I actually see them winning the conference this year. I mean, the conference this year. They should take the ACC. I think Clemson will be right behind them. They'll probably end up losing in the ACC championship game. And if Florida gets everything right like they should, I can totally see them going to the college football playoffs. I think that'd be one of the teams that will end up making it. They have a good chance of going undefeated or losing only one game. I'm 100% sold on what Florida State is selling today. They're my team in the ACC to win.
Yeah, and I was talking to Tyler just before we started the show too that it's that first game of the season for Florida State going against LSU. The winner of that game, they can go and they're in a very good spot because you can still go through. And I feel like the winner of that game needs to be LSU out of either of them if they both want to be able to make it to the playoffs. But if the winner of that game can go walk away feeling really good about their season, that they don't have to fight back or anything. But the loser of that game can't lose another one if they want to make the playoffs, because you're just not going to get a 2-loss team in unless we have a very hectic year. So with it being the last year of the 4-team playoffs, I think the both of those teams can get in. So I like your prediction too. I like Florida State to be able to sneak their way in this year too. But let's go ahead and jump over to the playoffs since we're talking about it. Who's kind of your guys' top 4 teams to kind of make the playoffs this year? Who's the teams that you expect to be there? And maybe we'll throw in 6 if you guys aren't totally sure. Maybe we'll just say top 6. And who do you have winning it all? We'll start off with you, Tyler.
Yeah, I think that I think it's ultimately the number 1 seed is probably going to be whoever wins the SEC. I think that this is just LSU's year. I feel like this is just the year of LSU. We've seen Kim Mulkey win the national championship in year 2. We just saw Jay Johnson win the national championship in year 2. So there's definitely added pressure on Brian Kelly himself that he doesn't believe that they can win a national championship this year. I think that he says that next year. But I just feel like they have the talent on both sides of the ball to win that SEC. And when it gets over to Georgia, I just feel like LSU just has some more experience offense. Georgia definitely has some question marks going forward. I think that there's going to be 2 teams in the mix from the Big Ten. Wouldn't surprise me if we see Michigan and Penn State both in the playoff. I think that Penn State, as of now, would be my Big Ten championship winner. I think that, like I mentioned, I'm not writing them off. They're probably going to be a 10-2 team, but I think it's ultimately going to come down to whoever wins that Penn State and Michigan. It's going to be in Happy Valley. It's not the whiteout game. They decided to put the whiteout game against Iowa, but I definitely think that's going to be a hectic crowd. I think that they have an elite talent at quarterback with Drew Aller. I think that, ACC, Florida State's definitely going to be up there. I think that even if they lose that first game against LSU, they can definitely run the table and finish as an 11-1 team and get right there. And I think that the last spot could come down to who wins the Pac-12, either between USC and Washington. So right now I have to give it to USC. I think that their talent on the offensive side is crazy. I think that their defense, without Alex Grinch, they definitely have to figure it out before the start of the season. But my other 2 teams outside of that would definitely have to be, look out for Washington. Honestly, if you want to look for a group of 5 team that can make some noise, look for Tulane once again.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pick a lot for a group of 5 team to make some noise. And that was a question I think Ryan McCarthy put in was, could there be another sneak team to make it into the playoffs this year? So I like that. I like that as a pick. But yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, all the teams you listed are really big ones. I like the little bit of an upset in the Big Ten over there with Penn State too. I like that because Penn State does look like this could be the year, if any of them, to finally jump up. And kind of like what Kevin said earlier, I think James Franklin needs to put something together to win a big game. I don't think he could. I don't think he would necessarily get fired this year, but I think he could start to be on the hot seat if he doesn't have a good year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely, I'd like to see Penn State do some good things. But Jay, we'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I can see two teams going undefeated this year. And it's going to be kind of weird to say, but I see it being Michigan and Florida State. They're really the only two teams I sense schedule wise that truly have an opportunity to go end to end and end up undefeated. I think so. I think that's going to be your 1 and 2 seed. 3 seed is going to be the SEC champion. LSU has a chance to go undefeated. I just don't see it happening. I see them losing one game, and that is the only thing that keeps them from being undefeated. But I think they still ride the wave and make it to the playoffs. That's your third team. And honestly, your fourth team, I think it's going to go down between whoever wins the Big 12. Because I think the Big 12 champion will end up being only a one-loss team. So it'll be between, honestly, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas State, but I really think it's between Texas and Oklahoma. Whoever can finish the season with only one loss will be the one that ends up there. And I think, and this has been my prediction from the beginning, I think OU loses to Texas in the Red River, but beat them in the Big 12 championship.
I like that.
I think that's kind of the way it'll go, or it may actually flip, and maybe Oklahoma wins the Red River match and then lose in the Big 12 championship. But I don't see, I can't see either one of them beating both teams twice, beating each other twice. That's going to be really, really tough, even though Texas hasn't beat Oklahoma 2 years in a row in a very, very, very long time. We probably can bet that Oklahoma has a better chance. So I think that's going to be your fourth. And I think on the outside looking in will probably be USC and either Tennessee or Ohio State. Because I don't see Ohio State losing any games besides to Michigan. I think Michigan pulls out the three-peat. J.J. McCarthy is the more senior, tenured quarterback that's going to be playing in that game. So that's going to help them a lot. And then Caleb Williams is going to be, of course, racing around as the Heisman favorite again. They're going to do big things, but I think that Oregon game is going to be a little too much for them. Heck, the Washington game, if I'm correct, they travel to Washington, or it's vice versa. But I think that's going to be the game that's going to make them struggle as well.
Yeah, see, I'll list my teams that I think have a potential. I think the winner of the Big 12 has a potential if they're a one-loss team. I just have a feeling like you're going to have two-loss teams play in it, or you're going to have a one-loss team lose the Big 12 championship and knock themselves out, kind of like what we saw from the Pac-12 last year. So I'll say that the Big 12 has a chance. The ones that I think are a certain is you have a certain to have the SEC champion in there, and I think another one-loss SEC team could get in. So you have a possibility of 2 SEC teams, which just seems to be the norm. So I'm going to probably mark it up and say that there's probably going to be 2 SEC teams or 2 Big Ten teams, because I think if Ohio State walks away with only one loss on the season, that they inch their way in. So it's one or the other, 2 SEC or 2 Big Ten. The way that it just depending on how it plays out is how I feel like it's going to happen. It's going to pop up. So I do think LSU and Michigan are 2 locks. I think they lock themselves in from my predictions. And so I'm looking at those 2. I think that's going to be our national championship game if I have to make my prediction. And I think LSU can definitely pull that one out. But I like Michigan's chances this year a lot. So looking at those 2 teams, I think those 2 teams can make their way into the national championship game. I do think Florida State makes it to the playoffs this year. I think if I had to take my bet, I think LSU wins that first game of the season, and then Florida State wins out after that to make their way in. Now that 4th spot is tricky for me because you have a Pac-12, maybe a Big 12 to try to join in somewhere in there. I think if we're taking 4 different conferences, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be tough because the Pac-12 I think is going to beat themselves up and beat themselves out of the playoffs like they did last year. I just feel like that's just how it rolls out in the Pac-12, and I feel like the Big 12 is going to do that to themselves this year. So ultimately, I think Florida State, Michigan, LSU, And I'm going to throw Ohio State in there as well, because I just have a feeling like Ohio State's going to have another year where their one loss is to Michigan still make it into the playoffs. So that's kind of my prediction for who I think that top four could really be. Just from my gut feeling, it's just hard for me to pick a Pac-12 or Big 12 this year, just from looking at the teams and what they're piecing together and how they beat themselves out of the playoffs last year. So, but guys, it's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate everybody who was able to drop in. If you haven't already, make sure to give this video a like. That helps us out great here at Belly Up Sports. We thank everybody, and if you haven't already, also subscribe. We want some more subscribers so we can keep on growing. It's been a great journey to keep on growing here at Belly Up, and we appreciate everybody so much for watching, for supporting, and we hope all of you have a very great rest of your Saturday, and hopefully you all have a great season for whatever team it is that you're rooting for. We'll be rooting for you and your team, whoever it may be, unless it's Texas. And other than that, we can pretty much root for you guys. But we thank you all so much for your support. And until next time.